Chapter 56-62. Although I'm not a cultivator like Lang Chonghong when he was a general, I can roughly guess from his battle formation that there are at least 2 battlefields that his battle domain has replicated. Tang Xiaoyu said in a deep voice. Perhaps General Lang Chonghong's battle domain could replicate more battlefields, but Tang Xiaoyu didn't dare to think about replicating 2 battlefields. For him, he could only risk his life to replicate 2 battlefields. Kong Xinmu didn't deny Tang Xiaoyu's guess. For now, the battle domain displayed in the battle formation had already replicated 2 battlefields. As for whether the replicated battlefields would increase or not, there was no indication from the battle domain for the time being. The battle domain that replicated 2 battlefields enveloped the entire battle formation. All the cultivators in the battle formation could feel the pressure brought by it. The moment the battle formation's battle domain unfolded, some of the cultivators stopped moving. They stared at Kong Xinmu's direction and immediately guessed General Lang Chonghong's intentions. From the beginning, the one who released the clue of the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment was actually Lang Chonghong. The purpose of attracting so many cultivators here was to use the power of these cultivators to completely destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment. As for how to use the power of these cultivators, they could refer to the patrolling soldiers in the ancient desolate city. Aside from the soldiers who had a living heart, many of the soldiers were other cultivators who had entered the ancient desolate city. Once they lost, they would be refined into puppets by Lang Chonghong. Taoist Shou Yang was the first cultivator to enter the ancient desolate city. Even he couldn't defeat Lang Chonghong. In the end, Taoist Shou Yang couldn't escape and became one of the many soldiers in the ancient desolate city. However, he more or less retained his consciousness. He once persuaded Kong Xinmu to leave the ancient desolate city, probably because he learned that Kong Xinmu had the core engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment and deduced all of Lang Chonghong's plans, so he let him leave. The cultivators who weren't refined into puppets by the puppet insects in the ancient desolate city were all brought to this battle formation by the clue of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. It could be said that this battle formation was a game of chess played by Lang Chonghong. The chessboard had been arranged, and only the chess pieces were left. Previously, some people guessed that the chess pieces were the soldiers. Little did they know that they were the true chess pieces on the chessboard. The chess game had already begun. How could the life and death of the people in the chess game be determined by the heavens? The battlefield domain in the battle formation had already been activated, and the 2 replicated battlefields included all the cultivators within. The cultivators who came here were all above supreme beings. However, even if they were at the same level, there were still countless differences. Even though they were all supreme cultivators, the cultivators' comprehension of supreme divine power was not uniform, which also meant that their cultivation was different. Cultivators below the 5th level of supreme divine power were affected by the battlefield domain the moment it swept over. When the replicated battlefield arrived, he had already lost the ability to resist and was trapped in the battle formation. Cultivators at the 5th to 6th level of the supreme divine power level maintained a clear mind and consciousness. However, at this time, they were unable to protect themselves and had no time to care about Kong Xinmu. Of the hundreds of people who entered the formation, more than 10 cultivators had reached the 8th level of supreme divine power or even higher. Facing the 2 replicated battlefields in the battlefield domain, they were at ease. They were even thinking about how to use this opportunity to seize Kong Xinmu's fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. There were 3 people who were not affected by the battlefield domain at all. Rather than saying that they were trapped in the battle formation, it was more accurate to say that they entered the battle formation of their own accord. Among them was an ordinary-looking youth, Qing Fu, who was holding a folding fan, and Gu Tianze, who was following closely behind Qing Fu. The 3 were not far from Kong Xinmu. The one who made the 3 pay attention to Kong Xinmu was Tang Xiaoyu. Although Tang Xiaoyu wasn't an illustrious person, his identity was rather special. He used the name of a Heavenly Yuan Palace disciple to stir up trouble outside, but Heavenly Yuan Palace still only sent a righteous eldest senior brother to capture Tang Xiaoyu. And Heavenly Yuan Palace had clearly stated that they wanted eldest senior brother to capture Tang Xiaoyu personally. Why was Tang Xiaoyu together with Kong Xinmu? Did they know each other? The battlefield domain of the battle formation had already expanded. The entire battle formation was covered in a layer of blood energy. Kong Xinmu clearly felt the pressure increase. He did not know how many battlefields the battlefield domain had replicated, but he knew that the pressure had suddenly increased. This feeling made Kong Xinmu feel threatened. Brother Jiang, calm down first. I'll think of a way to get you out. Tang Xiaoyu's expression turned serious. He released his soul consciousness and wrapped it around him and Kong Shin-mu. Then, he started to study the myriad origin superimposition art. This was the first time Kong Shin-mu felt Tang Xiaoyu's power. The soul consciousness that leaked out caused Kong Shin-mu to be surprised. He knew that Tang Xiaoyu's cultivation was above the 7th level of divine power, but it seemed that he was even stronger. Kong Shin-mu used the power of the soul to remove the pressure brought by the battlefield domain. Relying on the supreme divine fire domain, he blocked a portion of the battlefield domain's attack. The instant the supreme divine fire domain collided with the battlefield domain, Kong Shin-mu's mind was suddenly shocked. The battlefield domain's replicated battlefields were actually increasing. There were already 3 levels. The most obvious change was that the blood energy in the battle formation was thicker. And at this time, what surprised Kong Shin-mu was that his 7 devouring devil sealing arts core mark suddenly opened. For a moment, he took in everything in the entire battlefield domain. In the sky above the battlefield domain, there were different levels of blood energy floating. There were a total of 3 levels. Just as he was sizing it up, the 4th level of blood energy appeared. Kong Shin-mu instantly understood. This was the battlefield replicated by the battlefield domain. There were a total of 4 battlefields. Holy shit! Is this person a madman? Tang Xiaoyu suddenly cursed. When he spoke, a bloody aura spread out. Kong Shin-mu turned his head and saw that Tang Xiaoyu was injured. Brother Zhang, hold on a while more. Although he was injured by the pressure of the 4 battlefields, Tang Xiaoyu quickly adjusted his state. Moreover, Tang Xiaoyu's state was recovering. Kong Shin-mu was not a heartless person. Tang Xiaoyu thought of ways to bring him out, so he naturally protected Tang Xiaoyu. Without hesitation, he released the power of the soul to detect any abnormalities in the surroundings. The battlefield domain replicated 4 battlefields. The cultivators in the battle formation were all refined into puppets one by one, becoming a part of the soldiers in the battle formation. The cultivators who became puppets had completely lost their self-awareness and listened to Lang Zhonghong's orders. The dozen or so 7th-level Supreme Divine Power cultivators were struggling to resist the pressure of the battlefield domain. Qing Fu and the other 2 only swept a cold glance at the struggling cultivators. Then their gazes once again landed on Kong Shin-mu and Tang Xiaoyu. They could see that Tang Xiaoyu was using the manifestation origin superposition technique. Tang Xiaoyu, who was using the technique, could be said to be at his weakest moment. Although he had a considerable amount of supreme divine power to protect himself, he could not take care of Kong Shin-mu. Chapter 56-63. The blood-colored mist that enveloped Kong Shin-mu and Tang Xiaoyu caught Gu Tianzi's attention. The instant the battle formation's battlefield domain spread out, the entire battle formation was dyed blood red. The entire space was filled with a blood-colored mist. As the number of battlefields replicated by the battlefield domain increased, the blood-colored mist became even more intense. It could be said that it was normal to see the blood-colored mist at this time. However, the blood-colored mist that enveloped Kong Shin-mu and Tang Xiaoyu seemed incompatible with the blood-colored mist of the battlefield domain. It was a faint layer of blood-colored mist. Although it seemed weak, it was able to resist the killing intent of the surrounding battlefield domain. Every time the battlefield's murderous aura surged over, it would be blocked by the faint layer of blood-colored mist. Grasshopper, that Kong Shin-mu really is as you said. He can't be underestimated. Gu Tianzi turned his head and glanced at Grasshopper beside him. What greeted Gu Tianzi was a fist wrapped in the power of blue lightning. Gu Tianzi reacted quickly and narrowly dodged Grasshopper's attack. You old thing, why did you suddenly attack? After Gu Tianzi steadied himself, he pointed at Grasshopper and cursed, flustered and exasperated. You're in my way. Grasshopper glanced coldly at Gu Tianzi and strode away. Hey, you've lived too long that your eyes and brain aren't working well, right? Why don't you open your eyes and see if I'm in your way? Gu Tianzi turned around and chased after Grasshopper. You'd better not follow me. Otherwise, the moment you leave the secret realm will be the moment you step into your grave. Grasshopper's cold voice resounded. I'm not following you. I'm going to find Feng. Gu Tianzi smiled mockingly, dodged Grasshopper's attack, and dashed in the direction that Grasshopper had left. After taking a few steps, he seemed to have sensed something and stopped abruptly. A pair of cold eyes fell on Kong Shin-mu. His fist that had been about to swing at Grasshopper changed direction. Jiang Shenwu abruptly sensed a chilling aura rushing towards him. Circulating his own strength, he sealed the supreme soul power surrounding Tang Xiaoyu's body. After doing all this, Kong Shinmu's eyes narrowed and glanced at the source of the cold aura. It was a middle-aged man with short silver hair. Kong Shinmu had no impression of this person's appearance, but he was no stranger to the aura flowing around him. Long before entering the perished realm, he had sensed this person's aura. At that time, there were too many cultivators, and the aura that leaked out from each cultivator was also very heterogeneous, so he could not identify them. He hadn't expected to sense it again at this time. Jiang Shenwu and Gu Tianze were actually separated by over 1,000 stone pillars, and among them were several thousand soldiers, as well as cultivators who had been refined into puppet soldiers. Jiang Shenwu relied on the 7 devouring devil sealing art to clearly see Gu Tianze. Gu Tianze's cultivation was not ordinary. He could naturally see Kong Shinmu clearly too. It was just that his attention was not entirely on Kong Shinmu. Not far away from Gu Tianze, there was a passerby-looking youth dressed in an ordinary long gown. Kong Shinmu had an impression of this person. Wasn't this that youth who was nagging after entering the ancient desolate city back then? If he remembered correctly, he seemed to have mentioned that the mystic realm was starting to move back then. Moreover, the mystic realm's next exit was highly likely to be in the outer realm. The myriad manifestations origin superimposition art that he displayed was much more exquisite compared to Tang Xiaoyu. This youth's performance was too ordinary compared to the surrounding cultivators who had already been refined into puppets, or those cultivators who had fallen into a predicament on the battlefield. Ordinary in this situation, it gave anyone a feeling that it was very abnormal. Kong Shinmu could not help taking another look at that youth. The feeling that that youth gave him was indeed very strange. There was clearly a living person standing there, but he could not sense any aura. No, that was not him. That was the shadow that he left behind. Suddenly, Kong Shinmu felt an obscure aura flashing past his body. Following that, the space behind him distorted slightly. He suddenly turned around and saw a youth standing there in that distorted space. It was precisely the appearance that he was sizing up just now. The youth who looked very ordinary. Immediately, that middle-aged man with short silver hair also swept over. Gu Tianze saw the person he was looking for at a glance. It turned out that he was hiding in the range of Kong Shinmu's supreme divine power. No wonder he could not sense his aura just now. The youth detected Gu Tianze's aura immediately. Seeing Gu Tianze sweeping over towards him, he was not anxious at all. Instead, he approached Kong Shinmu unhurriedly. This action made Kong Shinmu very puzzled. Kong Shinmu could not remember when he had provoked such a mysterious person. At once, he raised his mind and prepared to fight. "You're called Kong Shinmu?" The youth's voice was indifferent and calm, not the slightest bit affected by Gu Tianze, who was brimming with killing intent. The calmer and more indifferent the youth was, the heavier Kong Shinmu's heart became. He had the core inscription of the 7 devouring devil sealing art. He could see through the entire battle tactics, and could even see through the battlefield replicated by the battlefield domain. He actually could not see through the youth's aura meridians. He could only barely see that with each step the youth took, the space that he stepped into would distort. Apart from this, there was no other abnormality. "Yes." Kong Shinmu responded without a change in expression. The youth came in front of Kong Shinmu, sizing up the supreme soul force enveloping Kong Shinmu and Tang Xiaoyu, and said coolly, "A bit weak." His voice was very soft, and he said it very casually. Kong Shinmu was even more puzzled now. How his strength was did not seem to have any relation to him, right? The 7 devouring devil sealing art was really attractive. In order to obtain it, cultivators would always do some very confusing things. The secret territory is about to move to the outer domain. With your strength, I'm afraid you'll die as soon as you land. The youth restrained his expression, returning to the temperament that Kong Shinmu had when he first saw him. "So before you die, can you tell me the whereabouts of Emperor Shi's divine dragon?" The youth looked at Kong Shinmu and asked. Emperor Shi's divine dragon. This word caused Kong Shinmu's heart to freeze. What was his intention in looking for his master? "It's okay if you don't say it. There's still time. I'll wait for you outside the secret territory." Seeing that Kong Shinmu was silent, the youth did not intend to use forceful methods. Instead, he left very considerately. Just like him, he only took one step, and his entire person, along with his aura, disappeared completely. It had to be said that the youth's attainments in the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition technique had reached the peak. Of course, the youth's departure did not make Kong Shinmu relax. On the other hand, the air around him instantly froze. A powerful force pierced through the barrier formed by the supreme power of the soul and headed straight for him. Kong Shinmu condensed his supreme divine power, and only then was he able to counteract this incoming force. Chapter 56-64. Kong Shinmu only felt a powerful pressure coming towards him. His devouring power was suddenly released, enveloping his entire body and devouring all the pressure. After the devouring power devoured this power, he discovered that this was a supreme power of divinity. It was not the power of holy ice, nor was it the power of divine ice. This power exuded a kind of icy coldness. The supreme power that Kong Shinmu absorbed was too weak. After it solidified, it revealed a silver color. I didn't expect that you, this brat, is still quite capable. Gu Tianzi could not help but seriously size up Kong Shinmu. Gu Tianzi's target was originally the youth who had just left. Unexpectedly, when his power streaked across the space around Kong Shinmu, it pierced through the barrier that Kong Shinmu had set up. Kong Shinmu had actually directly blocked this power of his. Furthermore, he had even received the attack of his supreme power just now. Kong Shinmu did not know who this person was. He restrained his aura and stood on the spot, neither servile nor overbearing. Just now, he had only made a move out of self-defense. He had not intentionally offended Gu Tianzi. Gu Tianzi watched Kong Shinmu's every move and could not help but inwardly praise Kong Shinmu's boldness. Although this brat's cultivation was a little weak, he was not the kind of person who would let others bully him. He was someone who would not let himself suffer a loss. Furthermore, he also knew how to restrain his edge. This brat's tenacity was not bad. Gu Tianzi took a deep look at Kong Shinmu, whose aura did not diminish. He restrained his supreme power, circled around Kong Shinmu, and flew in the direction that the youth had left. When he left, Kong Shinmu sensed an icy aura sweep past him. But this icy aura only flashed by for a moment. Kong Shinmu's soul consciousness merely sensed this power, a power that only existed for a moment. Only when Gu Tianzi's aura completely disappeared from the space did Kong Shinmu let out a sigh of relief. Just now, this person's supreme divine power was too strange. Even his supreme martial skill was ever-changing. It was clearly irrational to clash head-on with him. Kong Shinmu glanced at Tang Xiaoyu, who was still deducing the manifestation origin superimposition technique. He strengthened the barrier around Tang Xiaoyu while he deduced the supreme divine power that he had just devoured. What surprised him was that the power that had been devoured by the devouring power had disappeared. The only thing that remained was the cold aura that was gradually dissipating from his body. Kong Shinmu simply activated the 7 devouring devil sealing art. Through the engraving, he saw a trace of white moon energy remaining in the air. This aura. Could it be the power of the supreme moon? Even though Kong Shinmu had devoured 9 types of supreme godly powers from the blood-red mist, there was no mention of moon power. He had only heard of such a force of nature. Throughout his cultivation journey, he had never seen a cultivator using the power of the supreme moon. At this time in the battle formation, other than the 5th-level supreme divine power cultivators, they had already been refined into zombie puppets. The remaining 6th-level supreme divine power cultivators, as the battlefield domain replicated more and more battlefields, were gradually trapped in the domain. The entire battle formation was completely covered by the battlefield domain, and the battlefield domain constantly replicated battlefields. There were already 6 battlefields. The entire sky above the battle formation had been contaminated by blood energy, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of blood. On top of the earthy gray stone pillars, there were layers of blood energy eroding. The pressure brought by the 6 battlefields made the remaining cultivators tired to maintain their sanity, and they could not spare any strength to resist this pressure. As a military general, Lang Chonghong had fought on countless battlefields in his life, and the souls that had been defeated by him were countless. After the battlefield domain replicated the 6 battlefields, it was as if it had brought the battlefields of the past into the domain. The entire battle formation was filled with battle cries and screams. Kong Shinmu could clearly see armored soldiers wielding long swords, rushing straight to his side. The 6 battlefields' pressure directly crushed those cultivators who were making their last struggle. Whether it was the first batch of cultivators that had been refined, or the cultivators that had fallen, they all turned into soldier puppets and surrounded Kong Xinmu. Qing Fu, Gu Tianzi, and the young man had left. In the entire battle formation, only Kong Xinmu and Tang Xiaoyu were not affected. But the 8-god star plate was affected. Lu Zi and Chong were forced to return to their original world. Due to the pressure of the battlefield domain, Kong Xinmu could not use the 8-god star plate to summon them again. The pressure of the 6 battlefields replicated by the battlefield domain instantly gathered towards Kong Xinmu and Tang Xiaoyu. In an instant, the pressure had already been completely withdrawn. Separated by the boundary, Kong Xinmu felt suffocated. Crack! A crack gradually appeared in the boundary that Kong Xinmu had set up. This boundary was set up by Kong Xinmu using the supreme power of the soul. Any change in the boundary would affect his soul consciousness. If the boundary broke, Kong Xinmu would definitely suffer a backlash. Seeing a crack appear on the boundary, Kong Xinmu hurriedly withdrew the supreme power of the soul. As soon as he put it away, a huge surge of blood qi surged toward him. Brother Jiang, focus. At this time, Tang Xiaoyu suddenly opened his mouth. Kong Xinmu quickly focused his mind. With his current soul consciousness, he activated the 7 devouring devil sealing art to the maximum. He could see that the space in front of him had divided into 9 passageways, and he could also see every movement of the oncoming puppet soldiers. Wherever the puppet soldiers passed, the stone pillars were sent flying, and the formation beneath their feet was trampled into holes. The entire battle formation was like a battlefield of slaughter. Under the shroud of the blurry night, the entire formation was shrouded in a layer of mysteriousness. The blood energy that shrouded the sky had already poured down. Tang Xiaoyu's hand seal suddenly paused, and the 9 passageways in front of him rapidly changed. The 2 entered one of the passageways. A breath later, the 2 appeared in a place where stone pillars stood. The blood energy that gradually spread over their heads clearly told Kong Xinmu and Jiang Xiaoyu that they were still in the battle formation. Strange, why can't I get out? Tang Xiaoyu's brows furrowed tightly, and he executed the myriad manifestation origin superimposition art again. He had just comprehended 9 essence superimposition arts. Logically speaking, when the 9 essence superimposition arts overlapped, they should be able to break through the shackles of this space and leave the battle formation. With the help of the 7 devouring devil sealing arts inscription, Kong Xinmu roughly saw the essence superimposition art that Tang Xiaoyu was currently executing. As the 9 passageways changed, they gradually overlapped. From the perspective of the space of the essence superimposition art, if the 9 passageways overlapped, it would open up a connection with the outside world. However, the space opened up by the overlapping of the 9 passageways was extremely fragile. If it was impacted by a powerful force, the space would collapse, and the passageway would break midway. In other words, the exit of the passageway would not be able to connect to the outside world. Brother Tang, help me tell the senior to wait for a moment. Chapter 56-65. Brother Jiang, what are you doing? After Tang Xiaoyu was sent into the tunnel instantly closed. When Tang Xiaoyu's vision became clear again, he appeared outside the battle formation. He was on the street of the ancient desolate city. Tang Xiaoyu was about to go to the courtyard with the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art when he saw Emoya standing on the side of the street. Emoya's eyes narrowed. Her slender jade-like hands kept changing hand seals. As her hand seals changed, the layers of formations in front of her kept changing. There was a faint white halo in the formation, but it gave Tang Xiaoyu a sense of oppression. Tang Xiaoyu moved to the side and retracted his aura to show his attitude. Emoya soon sensed Tang Xiaoyu's arrival and opened her beautiful eyes. Where is he? Emoya saw that Tang Xiaoyu was alone and was a little confused. Senior, Brother Jiang asked you to wait for him. He will be out soon. Tang Xiaoyu relayed Kong Xinmu's words to Emoya. Emoya narrowed her eyes when she heard that. Her beautiful eyes glanced at the courtyard not far away. After she was sent out by the 10,000 elephants essence folding art, she could no longer enter the battle formation. She wanted to use her supreme divine power to enter the courtyard's battle formation, but she unexpectedly found that the battle formation was covered by the battlefield domain. Lang Chonghong was a famous general in the ancient martial country. He had participated in hundreds and thousands of battles. If he used the battlefield domain to replicate the battlefield, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing that the battlefield domain had completely covered the battle formation, Mo Ye still couldn't get close to it. Tang Xiaoyu saw that Mo Ye's expression was serious and couldn't help but worry about Kong Xinmu. Thinking about it carefully, the current situation was quite disadvantageous to Kong Xinmu. His supreme divine power was only at the 6th level. If he wanted to go against such a terrifying battlefield domain, it would most likely not bode well. Tang Xiaoyu didn't say anything else. The hand seals in his hands changed again. As long as he reversed the spell just now, he would definitely be able to open the passage back. No! Mo Ye immediately noticed Tang Xiaoyu's action and hurriedly stopped him. Now that the battlefield domain has replicated nearly 7 battlefields, the surrounding space is no longer singular. If you use the 10,000 Elephants Essence folding art in multiple spaces, you might get lost in them. The Myriad Essence stacking technique was a spatial spell technique. It was also about multiple dimensions. Thus, Tang Xiaoyu did not hesitate. If there was something wrong, he could just stop. Mo Ye's slender and jade-like hands once again formed a seal. A faint white halo gradually approached the palace and seeped into it. Mo Ye was delighted. As long as her divine power could enter the battle formation, she would be able to contact Kong Xinmu. At this moment within the battle formation, after Kong Xinmu sent Tang Xiaoyu into the passageway opened by the manifestation origin art, the passageway didn't close. Instead, the space intersected. There were a total of 7 intersecting layers. It wasn't just this space, even the surrounding space that Kong Xinmu could sense was intertwined 7 times. These were the 7 battlefields replicated by the battlefield domain. When battles that took place in different spacetimes appeared at the same time, they formed a multidimensional space. With the power of 7 battlefields, apart from Kong Xinmu, who was the only cultivator in the entire battle formation, there were only the puppet soldiers and the cultivator puppets. Kong Xinmu knew very well that he couldn't use spatial spell techniques within the multidimensional space. Otherwise, if he got lost in a certain space, being trapped inside would be a small matter, but it would be troublesome if he got torn apart by the void storm in the space. He concealed his aura and used his extraordinary movement technique to avoid the killing aura of the battlefield. To be more precise, apart from them, there was another special existence. After the battlefield domain covered the entire battle formation, it replicated 7 battlefields. The 7 battlefields appeared at the same time within the battle formation, forming a new battlefield. He didn't know how Lang Zhonghong did it, but he managed to bring back the soldiers from the original battlefield. When there were only 2 battlefields, there were actually soldiers from the original battlefield, but their movements were slow, and most of them were just skeletons that posed no threat. As the battlefield domain grew stronger, the soldiers that appeared were more like the original soldiers from the original battlefield. Kong Xinmu had only moved a few meters before he was surrounded by the soldiers that appeared from the replicated battlefields. They were using the ancient martial arts of the ancient martial country. Every single one of the soldiers was using a different ancient martial art. There were several hundred soldiers surrounding Kong Xinmu, which meant that Kong Xinmu was facing the attacks of several hundred different ancient martial arts. Ancient martial arts couldn't be devoured, they could only be learned through memory. Kong Xinmu unleashed his supreme power of the soul to surround these several hundred soldiers. Every time they used an ancient martial art, it would be recorded in Kong Xinmu's memory. Memorizing ancient martial arts was very easy, but it was a bit difficult to deal with them. Kong Xinmu didn't expect that his supreme dragon martial art skill wouldn't be able to defeat these soldiers in one fell swoop. The soldiers on the battlefield seemed to have an endless supply of energy. Even if they were pushed back by Kong Xinmu, they would stand up again after a few breaths. Facing an opponent that couldn't be killed, Kong Xinmu knew that he couldn't be tired of fighting with them, or he would exhaust all his energy sooner or later. Kong Xinmu retracted his supreme dragon martial art skill and used his supreme god power. Other than releasing the power of the soul, Kong Xinmu could only use one type of supreme god power. He used the power of the supreme god fire and the supreme mystic iron power continuously, seamlessly linking them together, forcing back the soldiers that were gradually gathering. The killing aura in this new battlefield was getting thicker and thicker. Kong Xinmu focused his eyes, staring at the gradually materializing killing aura. The condensed black and red killing aura was like the power of lightning, suddenly attacking Kong Xinmu. Different from the power of lightning in the sky, the materialized killing aura attacked from all directions. It was so fast that Kong Xinmu could barely catch a trace of it. As the color of the materialized killing aura deepened, its speed reached a level that Kong Shinmu couldn't catch with the naked eye. The space was filled with the afterimages of the materialized killing aura. Kong Shinmu did not hesitate to use his devouring power. The devouring power quickly surged out, surrounding the materialized killing aura that was coming at him. Kong Shinmu's pupils shrank. The afterimages left in the battlefield were not the shadows left behind by the materialized killing aura, but the materialized killing aura. The afterimages that were like afterimages were the power of the killing aura. The materialized killing aura was shaped like lightning, and its speed was faster than the power of lightning. Moreover, it was born in the space at random times, and once it appeared, its target was Kong Shinmu. Its speed was so fast that it was comparable to teleportation. This was what Kong Shinmu saw through the 7 devouring demon sealing arts inscription. Kong Shinmu was in a tough battle. Let's see how long you can struggle. Lang Chonghong's distant voice suddenly resounded in the space. Chapter 56-66. Kong Shinmu sat cross-legged and gathered all the devouring power around his body. Is the devouring power what you're relying on? Lang Zhonghong's figure appeared in front of Kong Shinmu. He could clearly sense that Kong Shinmu was surrounded by a thick layer of obscure power. It was the devouring power. To be precise, the devouring power that enveloped Jiang Shenwu's body had a very special nature. It could devour domain power. The kid in front of him was only at level 6 supreme divine power. How could he have such a strong devouring power? It was obvious that his devouring power had been tempered by the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Any cultivator who was tainted by the 7 devouring demon sealing art had to die. I want to see if your devouring power, which can devour domain power, can devour my battlefield domain. Lang Zhonghong smirked. Every move he made stirred up the murderous aura in the battlefield. Several thunderous murderous auras emerged from the new battlefield, tearing at the devouring power around Kong Shinmu. Jiang Shenwu was truly shocked by this display of power. This power was so strong that even the devouring power could not devour it. Moreover, he could not dispel this power. He could only dodge it. Looks like it can't. Lang Zhonghong smirked. He pointed at the space next to Kong Shinmu. A crack appeared in the space. In order to avoid the attack of the murderous aura, Kong Shinmu skimmed to the position Lang Zhonghong pointed at. Before he could stabilize himself, he saw the crack in the space. At this moment, Kong Shinmu felt the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Every time the 7 devouring demon sealing art was activated, the most obvious change was that his eyes could see the flow of the cultivator's aura and the trajectory of the attack. Furthermore, an ice-cold aura would enter his soul and consciousness from the engraving, causing his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness to ripple. His soul consciousness's range of perception would unconsciously expand. Just now, Kong Shinmu had sensed this ice-cold aura. Following that, he could see Lang Zhonghong's true appearance. Underneath the heroic armor was actually a skeleton covered in human skin. Thinking about it, it made sense. More than 10,000 years had passed since General Lang Chonghong's ancient martial country. Even if he was extremely talented in cultivation, there would come a day when he would die of old age. Cultivation did not mean that one could live forever. Compared to ordinary people, cultivators aged slightly slower. The slower the various functions of the body aged, the longer one could live. It made sense that cultivators could live forever. But for now, it was impossible to achieve immortality. Originally, when Kong Shinmu was at the peak of the transcendent god realm, he had thought that if his cultivation reached the supreme level and he had supreme divine power, he would be able to pry into the secrets of the heavens of a long lifespan. However, when he stepped into the supreme realm, Kong Shinmu gradually understood. Supreme was not the end of cultivation. It could even be said to be a new beginning. The era of General Lang Chonghong was over. Kong Shinmu did not know what kind of faith he had relied on to persevere until now, but he inexplicably felt a sense of awe in his heart. When Lang Chonghong saw that Kong Shinmu had avoided his attack just now, he could not help but look at Kong Shinmu in a new light. On the surface, Kong Shinmu's strength was not enough to resist his power. But the truth was that Kong Shinmu had blocked it and even avoided the attack of the aura of killing. Lang Chonghong waved his hand, and the substantial aura of killing in the space stopped. On the battlefield that was shrouded in the color of blood, several dark red thunderbolts seemed to be frozen in time and stopped in mid-air. Lang Changhong's actions also showed that he did not plan to attack Kong Xinmu for the time being. Kong Xinmu naturally understood Lang Changhong's actions. Of course, his soul consciousness was still full of vigilance, and his nerves were stretched taut. Although you will die, I still adhere to my principles. Lang Changhong saw that Kong Xinmu's nerves were still stretched taut, and said lightly. Kong Xinmu focused his mind and withdrew his supreme soul power. There was something he had to admit. Not to mention that Lang Changhong did not plan to attack now. Even if Lang Changhong wanted to attack, his supreme soul power might not be of much use. After all, he was currently in General Lang Changhong's battlefield. His every move, all of it was within the control of General Lang Changhong. Just now, he had experienced the power of the aura of killing, and he could not resist it for a while. Kong Xinmu withdrew his own power, but did not withdraw his devouring power. Instead, he condensed the devouring power into the 7 devouring demon sealing art. If he borrowed the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, he might be able to refine the devouring power. In this way, he could devour the strange aura of killing. Pfft. Lang Changhong seemed to have seen through Kong Xinmu's thoughts, and smiled meaningfully. General Lang, may I be so bold as to ask? Kong Xinmu did not think about why Lang Changhong smiled, but asked the question in his heart. Why did you destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art? Kong Xinmu was not the first person to ask Lang Changhong this question. But Lang Changhong had never responded to anyone. The dead did not need to know too much about why. This was the first time Lang Changhong had seriously sized up Kong Xinmu. His cultivation foundation was not bad, and he seemed to be from the god dragons. He did not look old, and to be able to step into the supreme level at such a young age, and comprehend the 6th level of supreme divine power, proved that his comprehension was not bad. Unfortunately, he was tainted by the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Kid, why do you think I destroyed the 7 devouring demon sealing art? Lang Changhong asked calmly. Junior does not know, that is why I am asking Senior. Kong Xinmu answered honestly. Actually, from what he had encountered along the way, Kong Xinmu had more or less guessed why General Lang Changhong wanted to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art. However, Kong Xinmu still thought that way of thinking was too narrow-minded. Just because the 7 devouring demon sealing art was an object of darkness, he directly rejected the 7 devouring demon sealing art and destroyed it at all costs. This reason was a bit too absolute. From Kong Xinmu's point of view, there was no such thing as good or evil in martial arts. Only cultivators could be divided into good and evil. Of course, Kong Xinmu also had his own opinion on the matter of cultivators being divided into good and evil. At any time, every cultivator, even normal people, and even some divine beasts, spirit beasts, and vicious beasts all had their own standpoint. When something was biased towards one's standpoint, then that side was righteous. On the other hand, if one was biased towards the opponent's standpoint, then that side was evil to oneself. This was Kong Xinmu's opinion on good and evil. Just like how he had always seen General Lang Changhong as his opponent, and never said that Lang Changhong was evil. To Kong Xinmu, General Lang Changhong, who targeted him at every turn, and even trapped him in this battlefield domain, was his enemy. Chapter 56-67. My existence is to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing technique. Lang Changhong glanced at Kong Xinmu and took a step forward. He walked on the 7 battlefields that were replicated by the battlefield domain. Every battlefield here was a war that he had personally participated in. In order to protect his own country, he led troops to war. There were thousands of wars, big and small. These 7 battlefields were the battlefields that left the deepest impression on him. 7 of his trusted aides had died in these 7 wars. It was normal for life and death to part on the battlefield. However, to Lang Changhong, those 7 trusted aides were closer than family. When he was just a small guard in the ancient martial kingdom, the 7 of them had already followed him. Later, he became an indispensable general of the ancient martial kingdom through step-by-step efforts. The 7 trusted aides accompanied him on the battlefield. After becoming a general of the ancient martial kingdom, he did not win every battle. There were also losses. Whether it was in the ancient martial kingdom or on the battlefield, the soldiers in his hands would sometimes be out of control. Only the 7 of them had always followed him and accompanied him through life and death. However, in times of war there was always chaos. The 7 of them left. Lang Chonghong collected his thoughts and looked at Kong Shinmu. Whether it is the 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique that you have or the remaining fragments, they will all be destroyed. There is no right or wrong cultivation technique, Kong Shinmu said in a deep voice. Ha ha ha, well said. Lang Chonghong laughed loudly when he heard that. Kong Shinmu frowned. He did not know what Lang Chonghong's obsession was. He only knew that Lang Chonghong's obsession was too deep. As he said, his existence was to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing technique. The 7 devouring demon sealing technique is just a cultivation technique. Its use depends on the cultivator, not the technique itself. Kong Shinmu said sternly. Lang Chonghong obtained the 7 devouring demon sealing technique by some chance, and used it to help the ancient martial kingdom avenge its destruction. Later, for some reason, Lang Chonghong was counterattacked by the 7 devouring demon sealing technique. He was no longer himself. Not only did they slaughter their own soldiers, they also massacred many innocent civilians. After that, there was very little information about Lang Chonghong. That was all that Kong Shinmu knew about Lang Chonghong. These words were very implicit. He was also clearly telling Lang Zhonghong that the existence of the 7 devouring devil sealing technique was not wrong. The one who was wrong was the cultivator who cultivated it. What Kong Shinmu said was true, but in Lang Chonghong's opinion, Kong Shinmu was challenging him. The backlash from the 7 devouring devil sealing art was his fault. He should not have destroyed the 7 devouring devil sealing art. Brat, I'm not in a hurry to kill you. It's just that I see that your aptitude is not bad. Don't have any wishful thinking, and don't think that you can talk to me about your great principles. Lang Chonghong's voice was cold. As soon as he finished speaking, the substantial killing aura that was still in the air suddenly moved. There were also several arrows flying over. After the new battlefield was formed, all the stone pillars that existed in the battle formation had already returned to the battlefield domain. Then they turned into several sharp arrows and attacked Kong Shinmu with a substantial killing aura. Kong Shinmu used the power of the supreme black iron to block all these sharp arrows. There was still a hidden and powerful force in these sharp arrows that were blocked. However, the seal of the 7 devouring devil sealing technique did not absorb this force. Obviously, this force was not the power of rules. However, after he absorbed this force, this hidden force gradually sank into the sea of consciousness of his soul. Kong Shinmu was puzzled. Could it be that the supreme soul power could absorb this force? That force was hidden in the sea of consciousness of his soul, and he could no longer sense it. Kong Shinmu just thought that it was absorbed by the supreme soul power. Lang Chonghong appeared, and Kong Shinmu stood face to face with him. He could roughly sense Lang Chonghong's cultivation. The bones under the armor contained explosive power. That was the symbol of his powerful ancient martial arts. In addition to possessing powerful ancient martial arts, it was also his domain power. Lang Chonghong's domain power was relatively special. It was not considered a supreme domain power, but a domain power formed from the battlefield. Therefore, Kong Shinmu could not determine the level of Lang Chonghong's supreme divine power. The supreme black iron power? Lang Chonghong recognized the supreme divine power that Kong Shinmu had used just now, and he could not help but frown. Just now, Kong Shinmu had used the supreme divine fire domain power, which meant that he controlled the supreme divine fire power. His supreme divine fire power was also the strongest one he had comprehended so far, with 6 levels. Now, with the addition of the supreme black iron power and the supreme soul power that had been used as a barrier. From the time he broke into the battle formation until now, Kong Shinmu had already used 3 kinds of supreme divine powers. No, there were other supreme divine powers. In the Dragon Demon Cave, Kong Shinmu devoured the blood-colored mist that contained a variety of supreme divine powers. From the blood-colored mist, Kong Shinmu discovered at least 9 kinds of supreme divine powers. Because it was his first time stepping into the supreme level, he could only choose a relatively simple supreme divine power, so he chose the power of the supreme divine fire. The remaining 8 kinds of supreme divine powers were all placed in the 10-directional devil extreme seal. Later on, through the battle, he devoured the power of the supreme soul and the power of the supreme holy land. When he fought with other supreme experts, he comprehended the power of the supreme black iron that existed in the 10-directional devil extreme seal. In other words, Kong Shinmu had 4 kinds of supreme divine powers that he could fight with so far. Leng Chonghong also sensed the power of the Supreme Holy Land. He glanced at Kong Shinmu's feet. It was precisely because of the existence of this Supreme Holy Land that Kong Shinmu was not killed on the spot by the power of this new battlefield. You are indeed very strong. This was Leng Chonghong's evaluation of Kong Shinmu. For a young supreme cultivator like Kong Shinmu to be able to grasp 4 kinds of supreme divine powers at the same time, he was indeed one of the top geniuses. Of course, he also knew that Kong Shinmu had the 10-directional Devil Extreme Seal. He could also feel the other mixed supreme divine powers that existed in the 10-directional Devil Extreme Seal. Leng Chonghong's figure moved, and his entire body disappeared from the spot. At the same time, Kong Shinmu's figure suddenly rushed down. With the help of the Supreme Holy Land, Kong Shinmu avoided Leng Chonghong's sudden attack. His figure appeared where Leng Chonghong was standing just now. Leng Chonghong appeared where he was. Once again, Kong Shinmu avoided the attack. Leng Chonghong no longer showed mercy. The 7 devouring demon sealing art could not fall into Kong Shinmu's hands. Kong Shinmu had expected Leng Chonghong to personally make a move. With his obsession, he would not give up until he destroyed the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Of course, Kong Shinmu was not afraid of Leng Chonghong. He faced him head-on. His idea was right, but when they really fought, God Jiang only lasted for a few breaths of time before he was at a disadvantage. In Leng Chonghong's battlefield domain, Kong Shinmu's strength was suppressed and he could not unleash his full strength. Chapter 56-68. Being in Leng Chonghong's battlefield domain, Kong Shinmu's power was completely suppressed. As time passed, the pressure from the 7 battlefields within the battlefield domain gradually increased. The most obvious example was that just now, Kong Shinmu was able to use his Supreme Dragon Martial Technique to defend against the materialized aura of death. Now, his Supreme Dragon Martial Technique could no longer defend against the materialized aura of death. It was so much so that it was difficult for him to even avoid the materialized aura of death. The power of black and red lightning that rampaged within the battlefield domain was the materialized power of the aura of death. The essence of this power was the special power that came from the 7 battlefields. It was equivalent to the power of the battle between the soldiers on the 7 battlefields, the murderous aura that filled the battlefields, and the resentment of the soldiers who died in battle, as well as various other powers. It could be said that this power was born from obsession. It was a dark type of power that carried a lot of negative energy. Once it invaded a cultivator's soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness, it would affect the cultivator's mind. Speaking of which, this power was very heterogeneous. Even if the devouring power swallowed it, it could not be refined. In other words, after the devouring power swallowed this power, it would take a long time to refine the power that was useful to Kong Shinmu. Within the materialized aura of death, there was no supreme divine power that Kong Shinmu comprehended. There was also no Supreme Dragon Martial Technique. As for the soul consciousness within, Kong Shinmu did not dare to refine it. The power that was born from the 7 battlefields contained too many negative emotions, and there was a high chance that it would backfire. Because of this, after Kong Shinmu swallowed this power, he could only temporarily place it in the Extreme 10-Directional Demon Seal. Only the Extreme 10-Directional Demon Seal of Heaven and Earth could suppress this power. The materialized aura of death was ferocious, and with Leng Chonghong personally taking action, Kong Shinmu could not take care of it at the same time. After the devouring power swallowed a part of the aura of death, its speed became very slow. Kong Shinmu could only place his last hope on the power of the art of 7 devouring demon sealing. He had obtained the core engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art through the Extreme 10-Directional Devil Seal. In addition, he had obtained a fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art from the ancient desolate city not long ago. With the 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, this was the first time Kong Shinmu used the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Brat, you want to use the 7 devouring demon sealing art in front of me. As one of the users of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Leng Zhonghong sensed at the moment Kong Shinmu activated the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He couldn't help but smile coldly. It was undeniable that Kong Shinmu was talented and had excellent comprehension. However, the 7 devouring demon sealing art was no ordinary art. If it was so easy to obtain the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, how could it have been forgotten by the world for so long? Possessing the 7 devouring demon sealing art was one thing, But obtaining the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art was another. Even with the 7 devouring demon sealing art, he could only use a small portion of its power. Only by truly obtaining the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art would he be able to fully use the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. With just Kong Shinmu's ability, it was impossible for him to obtain the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. After absorbing the power of the second fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Kong Shinmu had only used its power once. This was his second attempt. The first time, he used it with the help of the devouring power. The power he displayed was very strong, but it was more like the power that the 7 devouring demon sealing art lent to him. When Kong Shinmu tried again, he failed. Humph! Leng Zhonghong snorted coldly and waved his hand. Above Kong Shinmu's head, a blood-colored curtain of the sky fell down. At this moment, Kong Shinmu clearly felt that his body was being locked down by an extremely powerful force. He couldn't move. After circulating his qi a few times, he found out what the force that was restricting his movements was. It was the substantial killing aura that he had devoured. Although the extreme 10-directional devil seal had locked down a portion of the killing aura, there was still a portion that burrowed into his body, invading his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. At this moment, this force combined with the external force, directly restricting Kong Shinmu's mobility. Just as the blood-colored curtain of the sky fell down, Kong Shinmu saw a faint milky white halo contained within. This halo was very weak. If not for his eyes being strengthened by the engraving, he wouldn't have been able to detect it. It was Senior Mo Ya's power. And if Kong Shinmu could sense Senior Mo Ya's power, then Leng Zhonghong naturally could as well. Leng Zhonghong grabbed the air, and a stream of blood qi swept towards the milky white halo, wanting to use this to block this power. The blood qi was a step ahead and blocked in front of Kong Shinmu, surrounding the faint white halo. Leng Zhonghong laughed sinisterly. That girl who came with you seems to have some ability. Previously, Mo Ya had followed Kong Shinmu into the battle array, so Leng Zhonghong had naturally seen Mo Ya's power. Especially in this kind of situation, Mo Ya actually sent her power into a new battlefield. She was indeed very strong. Kong Shinmu's eyes narrowed. Senior Mo Ya's power, was it blocked? No, it wasn't blocked. In the next instant, Kong Shinmu once again saw the faint white halo. The white halo only flashed for a moment, then it burrowed into his body. This familiar feeling was precisely Senior Mo Ya's divine power. After Senior Mo Ya's divine power entered his body, it wreaked havoc in his body with the power of the killing aura. Without the interference of the killing aura, Kong Shinmu relied on his own power to break free from the shackles of the battlefield domain. As he ran, he sensed the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Not long ago, he could already activate the core engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Why was he still unable to use the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art? Where exactly was the problem? Kong Shinmu retracted all the devouring power he had released. The 7 devouring demon sealing art itself was also a devouring technique. The only difference was that he wasn't sure what the 7 devouring demon sealing art could devour. He only knew that there were 7 stages of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, and each advancement required a certain amount of law force. Logically speaking, even if the 7 devouring demon sealing art didn't advance, it should still be able to be used normally. At most, it would just be a lack of power. Could it be that he hadn't completely integrated the power of the 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art? The entire battlefield was created by Leng Zhonghong. No matter where Kong Shinmu ran to, Leng Zhonghong would easily catch up to him, or even block his way. Kong Shinmu was also aware of this, but if he really stood still, he would definitely be struck to death by the thunder power formed by the killing aura. Bas! Bas! Just when Kong Shinmu had nowhere to run, a wave suddenly appeared in his sea of consciousness. Chapter 56-69. The 7 devouring demon sealing arts engraving suddenly made a strange noise, and Kong Shinmu clearly sensed the changes that were occurring. His soul consciousness sea of consciousness began to churn. Immediately, the core engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art floated above the soul consciousness sea of consciousness. The engraving was like a blood-colored eye, emitting a frightening cold light. The core engraving floated above the soul consciousness sea of consciousness for 3 breaths, then fell into the soul consciousness sea of consciousness. Although it was said to be the soul consciousness sea of consciousness, in fact, it was still a kind of mental power. The soul consciousness was equivalent to a cultivator's will, except that it had offensive power and relied on one's own mind to control the power. In essence, it was a kind of illusory power. In other words, it could not be seen with the naked eye. One could only sense the existence of this power by relying on perception. If this power was strong to a certain extent, measured by the supreme divine power, once the supreme divine power reached the 6th level, or even higher, the soul consciousness of the supreme cultivator would materialize. After the soul consciousness materialized, it would exist in an unstable form. The soul consciousness sea of consciousness was the general name of the soul consciousness after it materialized. It was a very general concept. After Kong Shin Mu swallowed the supreme soul power, his soul consciousness had been strengthened in a step-like manner. If it was said that before Kong Shin Mu swallowed the supreme soul power, his soul consciousness could only exist in the form of mist after it materialized. Then, after he swallowed the supreme soul power, his soul consciousness would exist in the form of a sea after it materialized. It could be regarded as a real soul consciousness sea of consciousness. At this moment, the 7 devouring demon sealing arts engraving fell into Kong Shin Mu's soul consciousness sea of consciousness. At this moment, Kong Shin Mu felt that his soul consciousness was strengthened in a step-like manner. As this power increased, Kong Shin Mu could sense the power of the entire battlefield, including Lang Chonghong himself. Every move that Lang Chonghong made in the ancient martial arts was under Kong Shin Mu's control. When the 7 devouring demon sealing arts engraving was completely integrated into Kong Shin Mu's soul consciousness sea of consciousness, Kong Shin Mu finally understood the essence of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The 7 devouring devil sealing art was a technique that had its own consciousness. Just like Dharma artifacts, high-grade Dharma artifacts absorbed the essence of heaven and earth. Over time, an artifact spirit would be born. Generally speaking, artifact spirits had their own consciousness. If a cultivator wanted to obtain a Dharma artifact with an artifact spirit, not only would they need to be strong enough to subdue the artifact, they would also need to be able to suppress the artifact spirit. If he couldn't suppress the artifact spirit, even if he obtained the artifact, he would be devoured by the artifact spirit sooner or later. The 7 devouring demon sealing art had its own consciousness. Kong Shin Mu was a little surprised. Even the 10-directional devil seal did not have its own consciousness, but the 7 devouring devil sealing art actually had its own consciousness. The self-consciousness of the 7 devouring demon sealing art called itself Spirit Seal, which was the same name as the first master of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Was there a connection between them? In order to obtain the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, one would need the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art self-consciousness. Fengling Kong Shin Mu also received Fengling's message. It did not recognize Kong Shin Mu as its master. This was within Kong Shin Mu's expectations. In terms of cultivation, Kong Shin Mu was very clear about his own limitations. Compared to Feng, he was definitely very weak. From a certain point of view, he was not a match for General Lang Zhonghong. At the very least, he would not be able to defeat Lang Zhonghong in a short period of time. Instead, he would be trapped by Lang Zhonghong. Fengling naturally would not recognize him as its master. Kong Shin Mu could understand why Fengling would appear at this time. If something were to happen to him, Fengling, who had finally been able to see the light of day, would once again be buried in the darkness. If he was unlucky, he might be destroyed by Lang Zhonghong. Fengling was the self-consciousness of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, and existed in the core engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The form it appeared in was a mark, which was also the mark that Kong Shin Mu saw in his own eyes earlier. Fengling appeared in Kong Shin Mu's sea of consciousness. The sensitive Lang Zhonghong had already sensed Fengling's appearance. "Come out!" As Lang Zhonghong's words fell, he slapped a palm towards Kong Shin Mu. This palm force drove the domain power of the battlefield, locking the space around Kong Shin Mu. Since he could not move, Kong Shin Mu exerted all his strength, preparing to receive Lang Zhonghong's palm force. However, right at this time, something that made Kong Shin Mu despair happened. The power that he gathered suddenly disappeared. Not only that, even his defensive power dissipated along with it. Was this Lang Zhonghong's power? Kong Shin Mu's expression darkened, gathering power again. If you use your power like this, it's really a waste of such a good divine dragon power. Suddenly, There was a mature-sounding, disdainful, androgynous voice resounding in his mind. Following closely, Kong Xinmu discovered that the power he was circulating actually deviated from his original cultivation path. "You're Fengling." Kong Xinmu realized that the person who spoke just now could be Fengling, distracted in the middle of a fight. "Do you want to die?" Fengling was not polite at all, and scolded Kong Xinmu mercilessly. Kong Xinmu pursed his lips and did not speak. He circulated his power according to the changed qi meridians. This was the first time he used his power like this. In a short breath of time, he actually circulated it no less than 10 times. The strength of the power was also far higher than the power he displayed before. Kong Xinmu used all the strength in his body to block Leng Zhonghong's palm attack. From Fengling's words, as well as Fengling's various actions, Kong Xinmu knew that the person who just removed his defensive power was Fengling. "Fengling, you can't escape." Leng Zhonghong knew that it was Fengling who lent Kong Xinmu his power just now. With Kong Xinmu's ability, not to mention the fact that the 7 Devouring Demon Sealing Art was incomplete. Even if Kong Xinmu had the complete 7 Devouring Demon Sealing Art, how much power could he use? It was just a last-ditch struggle. "Listen up, kid. I'm going to lend you my power now. As long as you follow my instructions, you will definitely be able to escape." Fengling's voice was low and deep. As soon as he finished speaking, Kong Xinmu clearly felt his power increasing. As his power increased, he felt a strange power gradually appear in his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. It was the existence of a faint layer of white fog. Kong Xinmu recognized Senior Mo Ya's power. Moreover, Senior Mo Ya's power had already been used up after helping him just now. This power that appeared now was definitely not Senior Mo Ya's power. What kind of power could it be? Very soon, Kong Xinmu knew what this power was. It was the Supreme Holy Ice Domain that he had devoured earlier. He did not control the Supreme Holy Ice power, so he could not use the Supreme Holy Ice Domain. Therefore he stored this power in the Extreme 10 Devil Seal. Chapter 56-70. The Supreme Holy Ice Domain was strong, but it was useless at a time like this. Kong Xinmu automatically ignored it. "You rascal." Of course, Fengling was also aware of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain that existed in Jiang Shenwu's Sea of Consciousness. Your cultivation level is nothing special, but you have quite a lot of cultivation techniques. "Is that so?" Kong Xinmu smiled bitterly. He was at a disadvantage because he did not master the power of Supreme Holy Ice. Otherwise, he could have used the Supreme Holy Ice Domain to fight the battlefield domain. "Do you want to feel the power of the Supreme Holy Ice Domain?" Fengling suddenly asked. Kong Xinmu was indeed tempted. The power of the Supreme Holy Ice sounded similar to the power of the Supreme Divine Fire or the power of the Supreme Holy Land. Actually, the nature of the power of Supreme Holy Ice was completely different from the other two powers. After mastering the 6th level of the power of Supreme Holy Ice, one could create ice out of thin air. Regardless of whether the space the cultivator was in had elements related to ice or not, they could create the power of ice. After mastering the 9th level, one could turn ice. As the name implied, one could turn everything in the world into ice. The degree of turning ice was related to the cultivator's own cultivation level. Of course, according to Kong Xinmu's guess, this was related to one's soul consciousness. Every Supreme Holy Ice Domain cultivator had an unlimited amount of soul consciousness. Under the 6th level of the Supreme Holy Ice Domain, cultivators could completely rely on their own Supreme Holy Ice Domain or their Supreme Dragon Martial techniques. But after reaching the 6th level, the outcome of a battle between cultivators, other than the strength of their Supreme Holy Ice Domain and their Supreme Dragon Martial techniques, would also depend on their soul consciousness. The strength of their soul consciousness would directly lead to the attack of their Supreme Holy Ice Domain or their Supreme Holy Ice Domain. In other words, every Supreme Holy Ice Domain cultivator would focus on cultivating their soul consciousness after reaching the 6th level of the power of Supreme Holy Ice Domain. Whether the power of Supreme Holy Ice Domain could create ice out of thin air at the 6th level or the power of Supreme Holy Ice Domain could turn ice at the 9th level, it all depended on the soul consciousness. "You're right." Fengling's words proved that Kong Xinmu was right. The difficulty of controlling such a powerful Supreme Holy Ice was on a completely different level compared to the power of a Supreme Divine Fire. The power of the Supreme Holy Ice was so strong, so the Supreme Holy Ice Domain was definitely very strong. In order to possess the power of the Supreme Holy Ice domain, one must first possess the power of the Supreme Holy Ice. Obviously, Kong Shinmu couldn't do it now. This kind of thing could only be thought of. Leng Chonghong approached step by step. The situation was grim, and Kong Shinmu knew very well that with his current strength, he would not be able to hold on for long. Can I try? Kong Shinmu made up his mind. Strength was not something that could be obtained for free. At the same time that he gained power, he would inevitably lose the corresponding price. With your current strength, you're indeed unable to unleash the power of the Supreme Holy Ice. It's actually not difficult to obtain this power. Kong Shinmu didn't know if it was his imagination, but Kong Shinmu felt that when Fengling said this, there was a hint of contempt in his tone. It was as if in his eyes, the power of the Supreme Holy Ice was just a casual power. Kong Shinmu's expression hardened as he waited for Fengling to continue. You need to sacrifice a type of supreme divine power as the price to obtain the power of the Supreme Holy Ice. The price that Fengling mentioned was within Kong Shinmu's expectations. However, Kong Shinmu didn't expect that the price would be to sacrifice a type of supreme divine power. Take note, after sacrificing this type of supreme divine power, you won't be able to use it for the rest of your life, Fengling added. Kong Shinmu's expression changed drastically. Won't be able to use it for the rest of his life? You look rather honest, but I didn't expect you to be such a greedy person. Fengling saw the changes in Kong Shinmu's heart. It wasn't just Kong Shinmu. Anyone would find it difficult to make a choice. Sacrifice a type of supreme divine power to obtain the right to use the power of the Supreme Holy Ice. But Fengling paused for a moment. The power of the Supreme Holy Ice obtained through this method can't be strengthened. The level of power that you obtained when you obtained it will always be the same level in the future. No matter what method you use, you won't be able to improve. These words gave Kong Shinmu an answer in his heart. He couldn't give up his future just because of a temporary need. He had plenty of time to slowly comprehend the power of the Supreme Holy Ice in the future. As if he knew what Kong Shinmu was thinking, Fengling said calmly, "You should be thinking about whether you have the chance to cultivate the power of the Supreme Holy Ice in the future." Fengling's words weren't false. You want to use the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique to forcefully increase your supreme divine power? On the other side, Leng Zhonghong also caught up. Seeing the faint black aura surrounding Kong Shinmu, he could guess what Kong Shinmu was thinking. All the choices that Kong Shinmu was facing now were choices that he had experienced before. No matter what choice he made, the final outcome couldn't be changed. Leng Zhonghong couldn't bear the fact that the 7 devouring demon sealing technique continued to exist in the world. Go and die. It was one thing for him to turn into a shard, but why did he have to appear in the world? Was it because the next cycle of fate had returned? With Kong Shinmu's talent, forget about bringing harm to the world, it was extremely likely that he could change the rules of cultivation. As soon as Leng Zhonghong gave the order, several powerful lightning bolts pierced towards Kong Shinmu. At the same time, all the soldiers who had died on the battlefield, whether they were soldiers that Leng Zhonghong had led or soldiers that he had killed, all turned into puppets and surrounded Kong Shinmu. These puppets bit and bit at Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu deeply felt that his power was out of control and was running amok in his body, making it impossible for him to use the Supreme Dragon technique. It was equivalent to Kong Shinmu standing there and taking a beating. If I die, it won't do you any good. Seeing that Fengling still hadn't made a move, Kong Shinmu said in a low voice. Fengling smiled when he heard that. He made his move. The moment the engraved mark lit up, a black aura flowed through his body. Kong Shinmu's power surged, and he could now use the Supreme Dragon technique as usual. When he regained his freedom, Kong Shinmu easily repelled the incoming puppet soldiers. When he used the Supreme Dragon technique, Kong Shinmu clearly felt that his power had greatly increased. Your usual chi meridian is wrong. Just follow my plan. As soon as Fengling's voice fell, Kong Shinmu sensed 2 different chi meridian routes. One of the routes was what he had just used. His power had indeed increased. Then what about the other route? As for the second route, before you can peek into the power of the rule, it's better not to move. Fengling's words dispelled Kong Shinmu's thoughts of trying. Fengling, this is not a place you should stay. Give up resisting. Leng Zhonghong was keenly aware that Kong Shinmu's power had increased and coldly shouted. Fengling didn't care about Lang Zhonghong. Kong Xinmu didn't want to stand on either side. He just wanted to leave this place. His relationship with Fengling was just one of benefits. If he died, Fengling would once again be buried in the darkness. He might even be directly destroyed by Lang Zhonghong. Hence, Kong Xinmu predicted that Fengling would help him. That was indeed the case. Fengling planned to help Kong Xinmu. Have you thought about sacrificing that supreme god power? Fengling checked Kong Xinmu's current power. The only thing he could use was the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. To use the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain, one must first grasp the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice. The few types of supreme divine powers that I possess now were all comprehended and obtained through my own abilities. Chapter 56-71. Permanently sacrificing a type of god power in exchange for a type of god power that could not be trained or advanced was something that no one would agree to, let alone Kong Xinmu. Now that he was in danger, if he did not exchange for this power, he might not even have a chance to live. However, Kong Xinmu was not the only one in danger. There was also Fengling of the Seven Devouring Demon Sealing Art. Kong Xinmu was no match for Lang Zhonghong. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated, or even killed. Moreover, Kong Xinmu had used up all his trump cards. The only thing that he did not use was the Extreme 10-Directional Demon Seal. Even though the Extreme 10-Directional Demon Seal was a sacred item, Kong Xinmu could not guarantee that it could break through the battlefield domain. If anything happened to Kong Xinmu, it would mean that Fengling had lost his protective barrier. The power that Fengling could control was stronger than all the power that Kong Xinmu could currently use. However, Fengling had to rely on the Seven Devouring Demon Sealing Art to survive. Currently, the Seven Devouring Demon Sealing Art was only a fragment. Other than the core seal that had a certain amount of attack power, the other fragment only perfected the seal's power. Fengling could not live without the fragment of the Seven Devouring Demon Sealing Art, and the fragment of the Seven Devouring Demon Sealing Art could not live without Kong Xinmu. Otherwise, he would face two consequences. One was to be buried in the darkness again, and no one knew how long it would be before he could see the light of day again. The other was to be destroyed by Lang Zhonghong. The power that Lang Zhonghong had displayed was something that even Fengling did not dare to be careless. As his former master, Fengling knew exactly how powerful Lang Zhonghong was. If he wanted to live, Kong Xinmu had to rely on Fengling's power. If he wanted to see the light of day again, Fengling had to rely on Kong Xinmu. Fengling was right. If he wanted to gain the ability to use the power of the holy ice in a short period of time, Kong Xinmu had to sacrifice a type of god power. That was only relative to him. Normally, supreme cultivators could only comprehend one type of supreme divine power based on their innate talent. For a supreme cultivator like him who only had a single supreme god power, if he sacrificed his supreme god power in exchange for new power, he would basically be crippled. Supreme cultivators who possessed twin supreme divine power had another type of supreme divine power. However, since they were twin supreme divine powers, sacrificing one supreme divine power in exchange for a new power would result in a situation where the two powers would repel each other. Two mutually repelling forces appeared in a cultivator's body at the same time. Without a doubt, the result was the same as the first one. Kong Xinmu was an exception. Right now, he had already grasped 4 types of supreme divine powers, and it was possible that he had even more supreme divine powers. To Kong Xinmu, sacrificing a supreme divine power was equivalent to crippling a martial technique. However, Kong Xinmu had risked his life to obtain these divine powers. Moreover, Kong Xinmu was sure that Fengling must have another way. Kid, you're quite clever. Although Fengling was only a type of spirit born from the Dharma tool, Fengling had existed since the ancient martial kingdom 10,000 years ago. He knew what Kong Xinmu was thinking like the back of his hand. Kong Xinmu actually had another guess. Fengling's so-called sacrifice of a supreme divine power might just be for him to use. Although the 7 devouring demon sealing art could only be advanced by relying on the rule power, there was no guarantee that Fengling had other means to advance the 7 devouring demon sealing art. With his ability, it was not impossible for him to unleash the greatest power of the supreme divine power. Regarding this, Kong Xinmu had long noticed it when Fengling changed the flow of his chi meridians. Are you ready? After a pause, Fengling spoke in a low voice. Before Jiang Xinwu could respond, he sensed that his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness were abruptly surging with huge waves. His soul consciousness was suddenly out of control. Don't be nervous. This is your power after all. I can't control it by myself. Feng Ling instructed Kong Xinmu on how to use the supreme divine power to resist the current attack. One had to admit that Feng Ling's words were very effective. Regarding the supreme divine power's use of the supreme dragon martial skill, Kong Xinmu had a few doubts about it. At this moment, it was solved. Lang Zhonghong saw that the situation was not good and no longer held back. He stood on the spot and used a language that Kong Xinmu had never heard of before, chanting in an unknown language. Following that, the surrounding space advanced layer by layer, and countless scenes of the battle flashed by one after another. Kong Xinmu clearly felt the pressure around him gradually increase. Following Lang Zhonghong's chanting, the battlefield domain replicated 10 battlefields, and the 10 battlefields merged completely. When the power of the 10 battlefields merged together, something happened that made Kong Xinmu incomparably shocked. The power of the 10 battlefields actually condensed the domain power of the battles that Lang Zhonghong participated in. This was not the end. At this moment, the entire desolate ancient city was filled with a bloody color. The bloody aura overflowed from the desolate ancient city and spread throughout the entire secret realm. As this faint layer of bloody aura spread, the dark and gloomy aura hidden in the secret realm was summoned and merged with this layer of bloody aura. The sealed secret realm had also existed for thousands of years, and it was always moving. Every time it reached a new place, there would be a new battle. In the secret realm, there were countless battles. Now, under the influence of Lang Zhonghong's power, these battlefields were all awakened. The power that once existed on the battlefields appeared in Lang Zhonghong's battlefield domain. Now, in this battlefield domain, on the basis of replicating the 10 battlefields, there were hundreds of battlefields replicated. The entire desolate ancient city was already covered by the battlefield domain. When the battlefield domain spread to the desolate ancient city, Tang Xiaoyu and Emoya had already left the desolate ancient city. However, this layer of power gradually spread out of the desolate ancient city, so it was the same no matter where they escaped to. Moreover, Kong Xinmu had not come out yet, and the two of them did not go far. Tang Xiaoyu had the myriad manifestation origin superposition technique, so his soul consciousness was already strong. In addition, his supreme domain power was relatively special. Although the battlefield domain was strong, it would not affect Tang Xiaoyu for a while. Needless to say, Emoya was different. Emoya's supreme divine power could purify all negative energy, and her supreme domain power was equivalent to the existence of a protective barrier, not letting this kind of power threaten her. However, both of them knew that the continuous expansion of the battlefield domain meant that Kong Xinmu's situation was not good. Senior, wait for me here, I will go find my eldest senior brother. After thinking for a long time, Tang Xiaoyu finally thought of his eldest senior brother. His eldest senior brother, Lian Yi, would definitely be able to use the myriad manifestation origin superposition technique to bring Kong Xinmu out of this place. Now is not the time to use the myriad manifestation origin superposition technique. Don't move. Emoya knew their current situation. Don't think that it was just a simple battlefield domain. In fact, the battlefield domain contained dozens of battlefields, which meant that dozens of spaces were stacked together. Under such circumstances, using the myriad manifestation origin superposition technique was undoubtedly courting death. Senior, I just tried it, it's fine. Tang Xiaoyu knew Senior Emoya's concerns, so he also tried it before deciding to find his eldest senior brother. It's too dangerous. Emoya was currently trying to break through the layers of battlefields. Chapter 56-72. Tang Xiaoyu felt the pressure from the battlefield domain. After a moment of hesitation, he performed the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique. However, this time, the hand seals he made were different from before. If one observed carefully, they would find that the hand seals Tang Xiaoyu made now were a mirror image of the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique's hand seals. Tang Xiaoyu's hand seals were completed, but he was not teleported away. It was not that there was an accident when he performed the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique, but he did not plan to teleport himself away. He wanted to use the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique to open a normal space-time passage in the battlefield domain. Even if it was a normal space-time passage, with Kong Xinmu's ability, he would definitely be able to escape from the battlefield domain. As the hand seals were completed, a small gray thing appeared between Tang Xiaoyu's hands. This gray thing was the size of an adult's fist, and it looked like a skull. Cracks appeared on the skull, and above the cracks, several gray auras intertwined, circling around Tang Xiaoyu's body. After Tang Xiaoyu activated the 10,000 Elephants Origin Folding Technique, a wisp of gray aura flew out of the skull, sweeping into the open space. The space opened a slit, which lasted for a breath of time before closing. This wisp of aura disappeared along with the space closing. Tang Xiaoyu frowned. Did he fail again? In the battlefield domain, Leng Zhonghong was just a little bit away from completing the final formation. However, at a certain moment, he suddenly felt a familiar power. Leng Zhonghong's mind was slightly shaken for a moment. 10,000 bone bell. Until now, Leng Zhonghong still remembered this. It should be said that no matter when or where, Leng Zhonghong would always remember the 10,000 bone bell. That kid with the 10,000 bone bell had already run away, and now he still wanted to die? Leng Zhonghong's eyes glanced at the source of that aura, patting the air in that direction. Kacha! A subtle sound rang out. Then, the gray aura that had invaded the battlefield domain was all patted away, gradually becoming silent in the battlefield domain. Kong Xinmu did not have time to care about the outside world. He used all his strength to resist the pressure of the battlefield domain. Once he relaxed, he would be completely bound by the power of the battlefield domain in this small space. At that time, let alone escaping, he might not even have the chance to resist. Suddenly, Kong Xinmu sensed a force that was different from the one in the battlefield coming towards him. Myriad Bone Bell? At this moment, Fengling also spoke. Myriad Bone Bell. This was not the first time Kong Xinmu had heard of this name. Not long ago, when they first entered here, Leng Zhonghong had mentioned the 10,000 bone bell. According to him, the 10,000 bone bell should be with Tang Xiaoyu. However, Tang Xiaoyu's performance at that time was very surprising. His expression and reaction gave people the feeling that he did not know what the 10,000 bone bell was. You also know of the 10,000 bone bell? Kong Xinmu replied telepathically. I should be the one asking you that, Fengling said. It seemed that Fengling knew what the myriad bone bell was. Speaking of which, this thing can be considered his nemesis. Fengling paused for a moment before speaking slowly. Kong Xinmu heard something from Fengling's words. Which him? Kong Xinmu asked casually. Leng Zhonghong. Fengling said indifferently. Kong Xinmu was even more convinced of his guess. The 10,000 bone bell was not only Leng Zhonghong's nemesis, it was also the nemesis of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. In short, there must be some connection between the 10,000 bone bell and the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Pay attention to Leng Zhonghong's chanting. Fengling did not want to continue the topic of the 10,000 bone bell, and focused his attention on fighting Leng Zhonghong. Although Kong Xinmu's ability was far from Fengling's, fortunately, he was also a member of the Dragon God clan, and the cultivation technique he practiced was passable. Kong Xinmu nodded, and focused on Leng Zhonghong's chanting. Although he did not really understand, Kong Xinmu guessed that the words Leng Zhonghong was chanting might not be the language of the ancient martial country. Obviously, what Leng Zhonghong was chanting was a kind of spiritual spell. It was a spell that used the mind and consciousness to control. The ancient martial country was famous for its ancient martial arts, and most likely would not be involved in this kind of spell. Leng Zhonghong must be chanting a spell from the 10,000 Gu country. This is the 10,000 Gu country's Gu technique, and it can use the supreme sacred ice domain to purify. Fengling released the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Even the 10 directional devil seals inscription was activated. The core inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing art originally existed in the 10 directional devil seal, and it served as the 10th layer of the seal. Now that the 7 devouring demon sealing art was activated, the inscription of the 10 directional devil seal was activated one by one. In a breath's time, the 9 inscription layers were activated. The 9 inscription layers of the 10 directional devil seal, with absolute power, spread around Kong Xinmu. The 9 inscription layers of the 10 directional devil seal destroyed the substantial murderous aura around Kong Xinmu. The battlefield domain that enveloped Kong Xinmu was also destroyed layer by layer. Taking advantage of this gap, Kong Xinmu broke free from the domain's restraints. When he broke free, Kong Shinmu realized that the space around him was suddenly dyed black. Following that, the space formed by the blood-red battlefield domain was invaded by a layer of black, and from time to time, a few blood-red lightning bolts swept over. Stop daydreaming. Feng Ling's voice suddenly exploded in Kong Shinmu's mind. Kong Shinmu moved his mind, and the blood-red lightning bolts in the surrounding black space decreased by a few. This is... Kong Shinmu gathered his mind and consciousness, and checked again, and found that the blood-red lightning bolts had indeed decreased by a lot. This is the final form of Lang Zhonghong's battle formation. Feng Ling had worked with Lang Zhonghong before, and was familiar with Lang Zhonghong's methods. It was just that, compared to back then, Lang Zhonghong's understanding of battle formations was several levels higher. This level was not something that could be defeated by cultivation alone. What was more important was one's temperament. Compared to Lang Zhonghong's experience, Kong Shinmu's knowledge and understanding of supreme god power were very limited. Moreover, Lang Zhonghong only had one thought, and that was to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Lang Zhonghong's obsession to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art was the only thing that kept him alive. Perhaps only by destroying the 7 devouring demon sealing art could he defeat Lang Zhonghong. Feng Ling obviously would not allow this to happen. Kong Shinmu kept himself awake at all times. The battle formation that was displayed now contained a power that was unfamiliar to Kong Shinmu, but also somewhat familiar. What was unfamiliar to Kong Shinmu was that the blood-red lightning bolts that appeared in the formation were like illusions. But they all had offensive power. Just now, under Feng Ling's call, Kong Shinmu gathered his mind and consciousness, and indeed saw that the blood-red lightning bolts had decreased, but he also touched one of them. This bolt of lightning ignored Kong Shinmu's pitch-black dragon scales, invaded his meridians, and blocked the flow of energy. It even felt like it was occupying his mind and consciousness. Kong Shinmu sensed this, but was unable to stop it. Fortunately, Feng Ling blocked it. Chapter 56-73. Is this the power of the law? Kong Shinmu wasn't sure if this force was the power of the law or not. The power of the law was unpredictable and had many forms. Those who weren't a cultivator of the law domain would find it hard to grasp its true essence. Kong Shinmu hadn't stepped into the supreme realm for long. Among the supreme divine powers he grasped, only the supreme divine fire had reached the 6th level. Moreover, it barely reached the 6th level. Although he had comprehended a certain level of the supreme divine fire domain, he was still far from being able to contend against Lang Zhonghong. Not to mention the power that Lang Zhonghong was displaying right now that seemed to be the power of the law. Nope. Feng Ling's reply made Kong Shinmu even more confused. If it wasn't the power of the law, then what was it? It's the manifestation of the power of the domain. Feng Ling knew that Kong Shinmu hadn't seen the manifestation of the power of the domain before, so he explained. The manifestation of the power of the domain was indeed the first time Kong Shinmu had heard of it. Just like that white halo not long ago, it was also the manifestation of the power of the domain. Feng Ling was referring to Senior Mo Ya's power. Mo Ya was actually able to manifest the power of the domain. There's also that gray talisman just now, Feng Ling added. The gray talisman should be referring to the gray force that suddenly rushed over. That energy only lasted for a moment, and Jiang Shenwu didn't even have time to sense what kind of energy it was before it suddenly disappeared. He only knew that Lang Zhonghong had mentioned the 10,000 bone bell again. That gray talisman should be the power of the 10,000 bone bell. Just as he thought of this, Kong Shinmu felt a strange force appearing in his sea of consciousness. It was also at this moment that Kong Shinmu noticed that there was a layer of faint aura floating in his sea of consciousness. It was like a mist, ethereal and mysterious. Previously, he thought that this was Senior Mo Ya's power. Only now did he realize that this wasn't Senior Mo Ya's power. This was the white mist that was absorbed from the annihilation. That white mist was the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. The power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain was actually floating in his sea of consciousness? Kong Shinmu tried to connect with the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain, but he failed. Before grasping the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain, it was impossible to use it. If you only had your domain power, you would definitely not be able to leave this place. But now that your domain power has materialized, you will be much easier to deal with. But now, it is much easier to deal with you. After saying those words, the spirit sealing was gone? After saying that, Fengling was gone? After the seal of the 7 devouring devil sealing art was activated, Fengling appeared. Leng Zhonghong wanted to destroy the 7 devouring devil sealing art. As the spirit of the 7 devouring devil sealing art, Fengling had to protect himself, so he appeared to help Jiang Shenwu. However, what Jiang Shenwu didn't expect was that Fengling, who was still talking big just a moment ago, suddenly disappeared the next moment. Not only that, but the 7 devouring demon sealing technique also closed. Kong Shinmu suddenly didn't understand what Fengling was trying to do. He called out to Fengling in his heart, but there was no response. Leng Zhonghong's attacks continued. Moreover, Leng Zhonghong had already completed the final form of the battle formation. Kong Shinmu had completely lost contact with the outside world. The space he was in now looked like a new and unfamiliar world. Leng Zhonghong and his soldiers were here. Of course, there were some other living beings. These living beings weren't the puppet soldiers that Leng Zhonghong had refined. When the entire battle formation was formed, Kong Shinmu and Senior Mo Ya were inside. At that time, Kong Shinmu saw that there was an empty space below the foundation of the formation. Standing in the formation, he couldn't see what was below the empty space. Now, Kong Shinmu knew what existed below the empty space. It wasn't a living being of this world. In other words, it was an existence similar to the other world. Kong Shinmu's gaze swept across the blood-colored lightning power in the entire space once again. After the battlefield domain materialized, all the killing aura completely turned into blood-colored lightning power, each one accumulating power and waiting to be unleashed. And Leng Zhonghong didn't know what he was worried about, but he didn't make a move for a while. Kong Shinmu gathered the supreme power of the soul, planning to use his own strength to resist the blood-colored lightning power that could sweep over at any time. Fengling was right. After the battlefield domain's power materialized, it could be used as a supreme martial skill, or a supreme divine power to resist. At this time, when Kong Shinmu gathered the supreme power of the soul, he discovered that the sea of consciousness of his soul was churning even more violently. As the sea of consciousness of his soul continued to churn, Kong Shinmu's supreme power of the soul was somewhat out of control. The white mist floating in the sea of consciousness of his soul suddenly gathered together. At this moment, Kong Shinmu felt the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique's inscription. The inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique did not close. Kong Shinmu felt the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique fusing with the devouring power. Not long after, the devouring power was completely absorbed by the inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique. At the same time, a scarlet aura floated around Kong Shinmu's body. This scarlet power was the brand new devouring power. Originally, the devouring power was just a force, just like the power of the domain, just a virtual force. However, after obtaining the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique, the devouring power also materialized. Without any hesitation, Kong Shinmu released the materialized devouring power. It was a decisive way to fight, which was to use the supreme dragon martial skill. Not only did it have offensive power, but it could also devour the opponent's power. As expected, the devouring power repelled several blood-colored lightning powers, and also devoured the blood-colored lightning power's intrinsic power. The blood-colored lightning power was only the materialization of the killing aura, and it was also the power that existed in the battlefield domain. The devouring power was equivalent to devouring the power of the battlefield domain. Kid, you're really skilled, aren't you? Leng Zhonghong had lived for so many years, but this was the first time he saw a cultivator like Kong Shinmu. He did not deny that Kong Shinmu's comprehension ability was excellent, and the devouring power he possessed was also very strong. However, he did not expect that Kong Shinmu would think of such a method. However, to be able to devour the power of his battlefield domain, would he be able to control this power? Leng Zhonghong's hand seals quickly changed, and Kong Shinmu felt a strange feeling coming from the power that the devouring power had devoured. That was the power of Leng Zhonghong's battlefield domain. Since it has been devoured, then it is my power. If I can't even control my own power, then this trip would have been in vain. Kong Shinmu's expression froze. Having said that, the power of the battlefield domain was indeed powerful. Soon, it broke through the power of his supreme divine fire domain. The supreme divine fire domain's power was broken, and the supreme divine fire's power was also seriously consumed. He would not be able to use the Supreme Divine Fire's power for a short period of time. There was also another power. The Supreme Soul Power. Just now, the Supreme Heart Soul Power had gathered on its own. At this moment, it was just in time to control the power of the battlefield domain that had been devoured. However, something happened again. Not only Kong Shinmu himself, but even his opponent, Lang Zhonghong, was stunned. Chapter 56-74. Without the obstruction of the Supreme Soul Power, Lang Zhonghong's battlefield domain power invaded Kong Shinmu's mind and sea of consciousness. Kong Shinmu was somewhat dumbfounded. It felt as if he had purposely brought the power of the battlefield's domain into his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. Stop struggling. Lang Zhonghong smiled grimly and didn't hold back at all. You really know how to joke. Even though Lang Zhonghong's power had invaded Kong Shinmu's mind and sea of consciousness, Kong Shinmu still gathered his strength to resist this foreign force. With a wave of his hand, the 8-God star disc flashed out. Kong Shinmu wasn't sure if the 8-God star disc could resist Lang Zhonghong, but he had only one way out. The creatures in the strange space he was in now were similar to the creatures in the other world. The ancient spirits should be able to resist them. The first contracted creature Kong Shinmu summoned was still Lu Zi. Lu Zi was the holder of the 8-God star disc. After being summoned by Kong Shinmu, she unconditionally followed Kong Shinmu's orders. As soon as she came out, she went straight to Lang Zhonghong. Lang Zhonghong recognized who Lu Zi was and was a little surprised. Ancient spirits. This surprised voice made Kong Shinmu frown slightly. Suddenly, an ominous premonition emerged in Kong Shinmu's heart. The final form of the battle formation was like a brand new world. At present, there were already creatures in this world that Kong Shinmu was unfamiliar with. Could it be that this world could also summon ancient spirits? Looking around the world again, Kong Shinmu found it more and more familiar. It looked very much like the vortex gate he had seen in the parish. Only then did he suddenly remember that the vortex gate created in the parish was also formed by the collision of the parish created by Lang Zhonghong and the power of experts. Kong Shinmu gathered his strength and controlled the 8-God star disc. At this point, only Lu Zi alone might not be able to fight against Lang Zhonghong. Jiang Shenwu didn't know who the contracted creature shrouded in black shadows was, but he personally hoped that person would show up. Perhaps he was the only one who could help Kong Shinmu now. Since he didn't know who the other party was, Kong Shinmu couldn't contact him at the moment. Or rather, Kong Shinmu did not know what kind of power he should use to summon him. From the previous exchange, Kong Shinmu realized that his opponent was very strong. At that time, it was also because he had stalled for time. Otherwise, he would have been defeated sooner or later. On the other hand, in addition to summoning the contracted life form in the 8-God star plate, Kong Shinmu also had to pay attention to the changes in his mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. After the power that belonged to Lang Zhonghong entered his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness, it disappeared without a trace. On the other side, Lu Zi was already surrounded by those unfamiliar creatures. Even so, Lu Zi was still able to deal with them calmly. This made Kong Shinmu even more certain that the creatures in this new world were ancient spirits. Even if they weren't ancient spirits, they must be creatures from the other world. Immediately after that, Snake also showed up. It was just that Snake was somewhat rebellious. Seeing that Kong Shinmu's situation wasn't optimistic, it set its target on Kong Shinmu. Snake, what are you doing? Lu Zi wanted to stop them, but she was blocked by the creatures in this space. Of course I'm going to kill him and avenge my master, Snake said with a cold laugh. Snake's voice was loud and clear, just like its height. As soon as it finished, Snake's laughter echoed in the entire space. What a horrible voice. At that moment, an extremely disgusted voice rang out in Kong Shinmu's mind. It was Fengling's voice. You're still here, Fengling? Kong Shinmu looked around, but couldn't find Fengling. However, it was indeed Fengling who had just spoken. Don't worry about me, Fengling said flatly. Just focus on controlling your power. What other power do I have to control? Kong Shinmu said somewhat helplessly. In his current situation, he was like a dying man struggling on his deathbed. Fool! Fengling said flatly, and then didn't say another word. At first, Kong Shinmu didn't quite understand what Fengling meant, but he soon understood. A white aura gradually appeared in his mind, soul, and sea of consciousness. That white aura pervaded his entire soul and sea of consciousness. The white aura would spread out as his soul and sea of consciousness moved. This was the power of the supreme sacred ice realm. Kong Shinmu tried to control it, and discovered that he could actually control the power of the supreme sacred ice realm. While controlling the power of the supreme sacred ice realm, Kong Shinmu unexpectedly sensed the supreme soul power that had disappeared earlier. It turned out that the supreme sacred ice realm had absorbed the supreme soul power. The supreme soul power acted as the existence of the supreme sacred ice realm. It was like a medium that released the power of the supreme sacred ice realm. In other words, even if Kong Shinmu didn't control the power of the supreme sacred ice realm, he could still use the supreme sacred ice realm. Thank you. Kong Shinmu thanked him. He knew that this was Fengling's ability. Don't talk nonsense. Show me what you've got. But you must remember to keep that thing of his in the end. Fengling's words caused Kong Shinmu to focus. It's death. Fengling added. Death had already been destroyed a few days ago. Anyone who entered the ancient desolate antiquity city knew about it. Many cultivators had even personally experienced the explosion of death. Mentioning death at this time was indeed confusing. However, Kong Shinmu believed that Fengling didn't need to trick him. Otherwise, he would only be sending himself to his death. Kong Shinmu had just comprehended the power of the supreme sacred ice realm when he saw Gu attacking him. Kong Shinmu slapped the air, and Gu's huge body froze in mid-air, unable to move. Unable to move. He opened his bloody mouth and let out one terrifying roar after another. Every time it let out a roar, the space would tremble. No matter how Gu struggled, it couldn't escape. In the end it gave in. Kong Shinmu's hand gestures changed rapidly, forming a seal that landed on Gu's body. Gu's body descended. After greeting Kong Shinmu, it followed Lu Zi to fight against the enemy. Crack! The trembling space finally shattered and innumerable unfamiliar life forms surged out from within. Seeing this scene, Kong Shinmu's pupils shrank. Countless creatures emerged from the cracked space, and all of them were wrapped in black shadows. No matter how strong they were, the aura they emitted was the same as the mysterious contracted creature that Kong Shinmu had seen. Kong Shinmu had fought with that creature before, so he knew how strong it was. What he didn't expect was that there were so many people as strong as that. When the mysterious black figure appeared, it suppressed Gu and Lu Zi with absolute power. Master, they seem to be Cruel's clansmen. Chapter 5675. Cruel's clansmen? Kong Shinmu's attention was completely focused on the figures shrouded in black shadows. So Cruel was that mysterious shadowy figure. Kong Shinmu was well aware of his strength. He didn't expect there to be so many people as strong as him. Master, Cruel might have to deal with these people personally. Lu Zi's tone was a little hesitant. Aren't you spouting nonsense? If Cruel wanted to help Master, he would have shown up long ago. He wouldn't be hiding until now. Cha said calmly. His voice was loud and clear. Once he opened his mouth, he attracted many of Cruel's clansmen. You shut up! Lu Zi shouted coldly. She hurriedly cast a spell to attract the attention of Cruel's clansmen. Cha knew that he had done something wrong. He didn't dare to be slow. He stepped forward and used his huge body to block Cruel's clansmen who wanted to get close to Kong Shinmu. Just as Cha said, if Cruel wanted to help, he would have shown up long ago. Kong Shinmu had also tried to summon him just now. However, there was no response at all. Not just Cruel, Divine Light and Pei Yuan didn't have any response either. Kong Shinmu looked at the 8-god star plate and put it away temporarily. However, he didn't stop his summoning spell. If any of them sensed it, it would be convenient for them to show up. Of course, this was just Kong Shinmu's expectation. He didn't have much hope either. Kong Shinmu actually had another concern. Lu Zi and Cha had acknowledged him as their master. Cruel, Pei Yuan, and Divine Light might not necessarily acknowledge him. What are you daydreaming about? As Kong Shinmu was thinking, Fengling's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Kong Shinmu quivered. He suddenly came back to his senses. He saw a figure shrouded in black shadows suddenly retreat. You did it! Kong Shinmu was confused. How is that possible? Fengling denied it directly. Kong Shinmu could still sense the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He also knew that it was in an active state. However, he couldn't see where Fengling was. Your 8 God Star Plate is incomplete. You need something else. As soon as Fengling finished speaking, the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art weakened a lot. Not long after, the seal also closed. It could be said that the 7 devouring demon sealing art and Fengling were Kong Shinmu's trump cards against those unknown creatures. The disappearance of Fengling and the closing of the seal were undoubtedly a fatal blow to Kong Shinmu. Just as Kong Shinmu was about to try activating the 7 devouring devil sealing art again, he sensed a powerful force coming from his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. The power of the supreme sacred ice domain suddenly spread out, with Jiang Shenwu as the center, spreading out in all directions. In an instant, a white mist permeated this strange world. Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. Leng Zhonghong naturally recognized this power. How did you get this power? However, he did not know that this power came from the annihilation he had created. That's the power derived from the self-created space of the artifact you created. Kong Shinmu did not reply to Leng Zhonghong, but another voice responded to Leng Zhonghong. This voice was extremely ear-piercing. It should have come from one of the people shrouded in black shadows. In other words, those people were all as strong as cruel. The supreme sacred ice domain formed a barrier around Kong Shinmu, blocking all the power that wanted to take the opportunity to attack Kong Shinmu. Using the supreme sacred ice domain to control the supreme sacred ice domain was Fengling's idea, and Kong Shinmu was the only precedent. Fengling had only wanted to try it out, but he did not expect it to actually succeed. This also proved that Kong Shinmu's talent was not to be underestimated. Would he become the next Fengling? This was just Fengling's guess. Judging from this alone was far from enough. Moreover, whether or not Kong Shinmu could leave this place alive was still an unknown. The supreme sacred ice domain appeared and swept through the entire space, erasing all dark elemental power. It even forcefully closed the gate of summoning opened by the 8 God Star Plate. Just like that, Lu Zi and Cha were forcefully sent back. Even if the 8 God Star Plate did not send them back, Kong Shinmu would have sent them back. Given the current situation, Lu Zi and Cha's power was far from enough. The supreme sacred ice domain that even Leng Zhonghong was afraid of had no effect on Cruel's people. Cruel's people were still standing in place. Looking at their postures, they were still in peak condition. Kid, your power is quite interesting. As they spoke, Cruel's people surrounded Kong Shinmu. Finally, they focused their attention on the 8 God Star Plate that Kong Shinmu had just taken out. After sizing up the 8 God Star Plate, the group of people laughed unscrupulously. That's the 8 God Star Plate. It's Cruel's contracted artifact, right? Jiang Shenwu couldn't tell, nor could he tell who was speaking. Looks like this kid really wants to summon Cruel. Actually, I want to fight Cruel too. Then why don't we wait? After the group of Cruel's people spoke, they surrounded Kong Shinmu. From time to time, they would release a technique to attack Kong Shinmu. However, they would all be blocked by the barrier around Kong Shinmu. The Supreme Sacred Ice Domain fused with the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. Thus, Kong Shinmu's soul consciousness and sea of consciousness had no defensive power. He had to constantly pay attention to the movements of his soul consciousness and sea of consciousness. He could not allow Cruel's people or Leng Zhonghong's power to invade it. If they were to invade it again, it would be a huge problem. The Supreme Sacred Ice Domain was indeed very strong. It forcefully closed the gate of Otherworld that Leng Zhonghong had opened and prevented more Cruel's people from entering. Because of this, the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain quickly used up the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain's power of the soul. With all his power drained, Kong Shinmu felt exhausted. After the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain's power disappeared, the space returned to its previous darkness. I thought this kid was good at fighting. I didn't expect him to be good at bluffing. Cruel's people wanted to take down Kong Shinmu in one fell swoop. What they did not expect was that even though the barrier around Kong Shinmu had disappeared, they still could not get close to Kong Shinmu. Then, the few of them retreated. No, they did not retreat. They were repelled by some kind of power. At this moment, Kong Shinmu could clearly feel the 8 God Star Plate suddenly move. Soon after, An old man in a white robe appeared. The moment he appeared, he repelled Cruel's people who were attacking Kong Shinmu again. Not only that, but he also forced all of Cruel's people to retreat. This scene shocked Kong Shinmu. Was this person Yuan Pu or Shenguang? How could he be so strong? Kid, are you the new owner of the 8 God Star Plate? Chapter 56-76. Shenguang. The white-robed old man in front of him was actually Shenguang. I am Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu looked at Shenguang. Shenguang had just defeated Cruel's people, so he had leaked some of his energy. Even so, Kong Shinmu couldn't see through Shenguang's cultivation. What era is it now? Shenguang glanced at Kong Shinmu, then looked away. He casually looked around and frowned. Has it been so long? Kong Shinmu was about to say something, but Shenguang waved at him, indicating that he didn't need to say anything. Shenguang had just looked around and had a basic understanding of the current era. What did you do to that disciple of the everlasting pavilion? Shenguang calmed himself down and looked at the 8 God Star Plate in Kong Shinmu's hands. He remembered that when the 8 God Star Plate fell into this world, it fell into the hands of a disciple of the everlasting pavilion called Hai Fan. Kong Shinmu's expression froze, and he looked at Shenguang cautiously. The contract creature he wanted to summon was actually Cruel. As for Shenguang, he didn't even think about it. When Hai Fan got the 8 God Star Plate, Shenguang was already the contract creature of the 8 God Star Plate. Who knew who his previous master was? With his current strength, he wasn't confident that he could control Shenguang. Shenguang saw Kong Shinmu's expression and knew what happened to Hai Fan. He wouldn't pursue the matter. In the world of cultivation, the weak were prey to the strong. Only the strong could survive, and the weak could only be trampled. Although it sounded cruel, this was what every cultivator had to go through. The fact that Kong Shinmu could snatch the 8 God Star Plate from Hai Fan proved that Kong Shinmu was stronger than Hai Fan, and he had the ability to own the 8 God Star Plate. Of course, the next time he was summoned to this world, even if the 8 God Star Plate changed owners, Shenguang wouldn't be surprised. He had signed a contract with the 8 God Star Plate, so he didn't care who the owner was. Whoever had the ability to seize the 8 God Star Plate would be the owner of the 8 God Star Plate. How could Kong Shinmu not think of the Divine Light's point of view? Just like Lu Zi back then, Lu Zi only recognized the 8 God Star Plate. Whoever possessed the 8 God Star Plate was her master. Only Chong resisted to a certain extent for the sake of Hai Fan. Regardless of whether Shenguang recognized the 8 God Star Plate or the owner of the 8 God Star Plate, at least he did not attack him now. Based on this, Kong Shinmu roughly deduced that the 8 God Astrolabe had a certain restriction on the Divine Light. In other words, the restrictions of the rules. Otherwise, with the power of the Divine Light, it could easily take down the owner of the 8 God Star Plate and remove the contract mark. Kong Shinmu looked at the 8 God Astrolabe and made up his mind. After leaving this place, he had to find the base of the 8 God Star Plate. The 8 God Astrolabe was incomplete, and Kong Shinmu's understanding of the 8 God Astrolabe was limited. He still had many doubts. Now, he was sure that as the earliest contracted being of the 8 God Astrolabe, the Divine Light would not attack the owner of the 8 God Astrolabe. As for Cruel and Piyuan, it was hard to say. Kong Shinmu did not dare to gamble. You want to leave this place, right? The Divine Light glanced at Kong Shinmu one last time, then looked at Lang Zhonghong. His expression froze. The aura leaking from Lang Zhonghong's body told him that this was a strong opponent. Kong Shinmu replied calmly. The Divine Light received Kong Shinmu's order and rushed forward to face Lang Zhonghong. You are. Lang Zhonghong was surprised to see the Divine Light. The aura leaking from this person was not from this world. People from the other world? The clansmen of Cruel that Lang Zhonghong had summoned were people from the other world. However, they were all repelled by this guy just now. You don't look like a normal living person. The Divine Light glanced at Lang Zhonghong and noticed that Lang Zhonghong was abnormal. Underneath the thick armor was a skeleton. What was maintaining the shape of the skeleton was the cluster of dead spirits that seemed to be endlessly growing. If the dead spirit aura in the skeleton was extinguished, Lang Zhonghong would be reduced to dust. Lang Zhonghong did not intend to say anything to the Divine Light. He waved his hand and gave it a palm strike. The The divine light caught Leng Zhonghong's palm strike. Then it slapped back with twice the force. Leng Zhonghong did not dodge. Instead, he chose to meet it head-on. As the two forces collided, the entire area shook violently. The closed gate to the other world opened again. More figures shrouded in black shadows dashed out, along with other unfamiliar clansmen. There were even ancient spirits. Kong Shinmu was shocked to see this. According to Lu Zi, ancient spirits could only leave the other world through the Gate of Contracts. To open the gate, they needed to have a magical tool. The 8-god star plate that Kong Shinmu had was one of them. Did the fact that Leng Zhonghong had summoned ancient spirits mean that he also had a magical tool? Wait. Kong Shinmu noticed something. The heavy armor that Leng Zhonghong was wearing. Just now, when the ancient spirits had shown up, he had seen numerous imprints on Leng Zhonghong's armor. There were no less than 10 imprints on it. Only then did Kong Shinmu leave a contract imprint on the 8-god star plate. Leng Zhonghong's magical tool had no less than 10 imprints. The more imprints he had, the more creatures he could form a contract with. Moreover, Kong Shinmu felt that the dozen or so imprints on Leng Zhonghong's magical tool represented the dozen races he had formed a contract with. Other than the figures wrapped in black shadows, which were Cruel's clansmen and ancient spirits, there were also more than 10 strange races. The last to emerge from the contracted gate were several colossal beings. They were Zhong's clansmen. Kong Shinmu subconsciously took a few steps forward. Facing so many contracted creatures, the divine light might not be able to do anything. Stop! However, the divine light stopped Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu stopped in his tracks. He told you to stop, so stop, Fengling's voice rang out again. By now, Kong Shinmu had realized that it was Fengling who had summoned the divine light. Did you call him here? As soon as Fengling said these words, a series of strange images appeared in Kong Shinmu's mind. Without his help, you wouldn't be able to leave this place alive, much less leave this place alive. These images were none other than the species illustrations that Leng Zhonghong had summoned from the gate. The species illustrations only lasted for a few breaths of time before vanishing. No, I can't pass through the gate with my power, Fengling said in a somewhat frustrated tone. After a short pause, he added, pay attention to Leng Zhonghong's dead spirit aura. Only by extinguishing his dead spirit aura can we get rid of him. Chapter 56-77. The dead spirit flame exists in his body. As soon as Fengling's voice fell, Kong Shinmu sensed a chilling aura emanating from Leng Zhonghong's body. The contracted life forms that Leng Zhonghong had summoned surrounded the divine light. Even though the divine light was strong, it was difficult to fight against so many enemies. It had no time to deal with Kong Shinmu. Leng Zhonghong took the opportunity to dash in front of Kong Shinmu. As his hands formed a series of hand seals, a prison appeared out of thin air, covering Kong Shinmu's body. The moment the prison appeared, Kong Shinmu dodged it with his movement skill. However, the moment his body appeared, he was still trapped by the prison. The entire prison was dark green in color. The eerie flames on the prison emitted a chilling aura, but it could burn everything that came close to it. A few contracted life forms were sent flying by the divine light. They happened to come into contact with this strange prison and were instantly burned to ashes. Be careful, this is the power of the dead spirit flame. Fengling reminded Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu originally wanted to use brute force to break the prison, but after seeing this scene, he did not dare to act rashly. Logically speaking, you have the pitch-black dragon scales on your body, so you should not be afraid of this dead spirit flame. Fengling added. The inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing art lit up again. At the same time, Kong Shinmu released his devouring power. After being tempered by the 7 devouring demon sealing art, the devouring power was different from before. The moment the devouring power was released, it enveloped Kong Shinmu's body, then gradually spread out, approaching the prison. As he approached the prison, Kong Shinmu clearly felt the scorching power from the prison. Within the scorching heat, there was a bone-chilling aura. The devouring power could not get close for a moment. What kind of power was the dead spirit flame? Even the devouring power could not devour it. Not only that, the prison suddenly shrank. The compelling devouring power also retracted, only condensing around Kong Shinmu's body. Kill him! Lang Zhonghong said in a low voice. The prison trapping Kong Shinmu suddenly shrank. Kong Shinmu had nowhere to hide and could only fight. The supreme devil seal of the 10 directions was activated at this moment. 9 seals flew out at the same time towards the prison. The power of the heaven and earth saint grade seal was still as strong as ever. The 9 seals of the extreme devil seal resisted the sudden contraction of the prison. Kong Shinmu sensed the essence of the energy within the prison through the 9 seals of the great 10-directional devil seal. The 9 engravings could only resist the power of the prison, not completely destroy it. Moreover, Kong Shinmu felt that the 9 seals of the supreme devil seal were only able to stop the prison from shrinking for a short period of time. He carefully analyzed Lang Zhonghong's words. Was this prison some kind of special creature? As he stepped into the supreme level, Kong Shinmu gained a new understanding of the path of cultivation. Being a supreme cultivator was just a new beginning for cultivation. Above that there was a new power, the power of rules. Moreover, this world was not the only world of cultivation. There was a brand new world called the Other World. There were the ancient spirits and other races in the Other World. Most of these clansmen had entered into contracts with the cultivators of this world and came to this world through the gate of contract. The armor that Lang Zhonghong was wearing was a type of contract magic tool. Through that contract instrument, he summoned the people of more than 10 races in the Other World. For now, Cruel's people were the most difficult to deal with. Now that this strange prison had appeared, Kong Shinmu sensed not only power from it, but also the aura of a living creature. This prison was a living creature. Perhaps it was also a creature from the new world. Kong Shinmu, listen to me. After a pause, Fengling suddenly said. This is a new creature, isn't it? Kong Shinmu focused, calculating the power of the Great Devil Seal's attack pattern. The prison seemed to be blocked by the Great Devil Seal's power and was in a static state. But in fact, this strange power was constantly moving. Moreover, the prison was constantly changing. The power of the extreme 10-directional devil seal had failed. Lang Zhonghong did not know what order he had given, but suddenly, a dense number of runes appeared on the prison. After the runes appeared in rows, they kept changing. Different words intertwined, forming one rune after another. The prison also changed from light to dark. This is the power of the dead spirit flame. Fengling said again. Later, the 3 of us will work together. The 3 of us? Kong Shinmu knew that Fengling had mentioned the divine light. Yes, he is the only one who can help you get out of here, Fengling said. Kong Shinmu was more and more convinced that the divine light was summoned by Fengling. The divine light is an uncertain factor. Fengling's words explained everything, and it also confirmed Kong Shinmu's previous guess. The divine light was strong, but it could respect the 8-god star plate, but it did not mean that it would respect the 8-god star plate's owner. As long as he can hold back those who are in the way, it will be fine, Fengling said. Kong Shinmu nodded. Later, follow my instructions. As soon as Fengling's voice fell, Kong Shinmu found that the 7 devouring demon sealing art seal lit up again. At this time, there was a complete seal on the 7 devouring demon sealing art seal. The seal flashed, then disappeared. Immediately, Kong Shinmu felt that his power had increased tremendously. Especially the devouring power surrounding his body. It swept towards the prison. When the devouring power approached the prison actually spread out in all directions. Then, a message appeared in Kong Shinmu's mind, which was related to the dead spirit flame. The dead spirit flame also came from the other world, and it was the power of the dead spirit clan, one of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans in the other world. When a cultivator's cultivation reached a certain realm, he would die unexpectedly, but his soul and consciousness were not destroyed, and he could condense new power. It was very likely that he could open the door to the other world, absorb the power of any of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans, and form the dead spirit flame. Lang Zhonghong's skeleton proved that he had died long ago, but he did exist in this world, which proved that he had absorbed the power of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans. The dead spirit flame in the skeleton was where all his power was. As long as the dead spirit flame was extinguished, it was equivalent to defeating Lang Zhonghong. After receiving Fengling's instructions, Kong Shinmu quickly broke out of the prison and came to Lang Zhonghong. Seeing Kong Shinmu break out of the prison, Lang Zhonghong was very surprised. What shocked him even more was that Kong Shinmu actually took the initiative to attack. You got the recognition of the 7 devouring demon sealing art? Kong Shinmu's current state was obviously stronger than before, and it was at least 5 levels stronger. Leng Zhonghong wanted to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He had destroyed the 7 devouring demon sealing art before, but he did not stop Fengling at that time, and Fengling luckily escaped, which led to today's trouble. Chapter 5678. As soon as Leng Zhonghong's voice fell, the destroyed prison once again appeared. The runes on the prison constantly changed at a speed that was difficult for the naked eye to capture. Before it even got close to Kong Shinmu could already feel the bone-piercing burning energy within. From time to time, there was also a piercing sound that rang in his ears. It was as if something was chirping, over and over again. Every time it rang, the sound would grow louder. It directly pierced through Kong Shinmu's ear and burrowed into his soul consciousness. Then, it spread out in his soul consciousness sea of consciousness. It rapidly swept towards the chi meridians in his body where the energy was circulating. This was a psychic energy. Even a supreme energy would find it hard to block it. Kong Shinmu's first reaction was to quickly retract his devouring power. He wanted to devour this strange energy. However, when Kong Shinmu retracted his devouring power, he was blocked by an invisible force that actually blocked his devouring power. Within his chi meridians, the cold energy flowed freely. The moment Kong Shinmu retracted his devouring power, he had already completed half a cycle and was about to complete a cycle. In a moment of desperation, Kong Shinmu activated the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal. Only with the help of the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal did he manage to block that energy. That strange cold energy actually reacted faster than the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal. It retracted into Kong Shinmu's soul consciousness sea of consciousness first. Then it concealed its aura. No matter what kind of energy it was, it now existed in Kong Shinmu's soul consciousness sea of consciousness. Sooner or later, it would be discovered by Kong Shinmu. However, Leng Zhonghong's voice kept echoing in Kong Shinmu's mind. Leng Zhonghong clearly did not say anything. In fact, he did not even move. However, his voice kept echoing in Kong Shinmu's ears. Following closely behind his voice, a cold and gloomy aura could be sensed. Being disturbed by this energy, Kong Shinmu could not calm his mind at all. Kong Shinmu, seal your senses and hearing. Fengling said hurriedly. Kong Shinmu hesitated. Sealing off one's hearing was fine, but sealing off one's perception was a big deal. Not to mention this was a moment of life and death. Even if it was a random battle, he couldn't easily seal off his senses. Listen to me if you want to live. Fengling sounded a little anxious. The 7 devouring devil sealing arts mark lit up and then extinguished. Kong Shinmu also sensed that the 7 devouring devil sealing arts power was about to run out. Without hesitation, he sealed off his senses and hearing. In that instant, he felt as if he was in a sealed environment. He couldn't sense any sound, let alone any enemies. He couldn't even sense the energy emanating from the cage. Kong Shinmu could only see with his naked eyes that the runes on the cage were constantly changing. After sealing off his senses, the energy that had invaded his body was gradually separated by his soul consciousness. Through his inner vision, Kong Shinmu could clearly see that the strange energy that had invaded his body was dark green in color. Its entire shape was like a skull. On top of the round ball, there were 2 eye-like things that emitted a faint aura. Was this the aura of death? What made Kong Shinmu different from other supreme soul cultivators of the same level was that his soul consciousness was very strong. After devouring the supreme soul power, his soul consciousness had achieved a qualitative breakthrough. His soul consciousness directly separated the aura of death that had invaded his body and blocked its path. This way, the aura of death could not enter Kong Shinmu's meridians. Just now, the supreme soul power had forced him to use the supreme sacred ice domain. After this battle, the devouring power had also devoured a lot of mental energy. After sealing off his senses, although he couldn't sense the surrounding energy, Kong Shinmu believed in Fengling. In this kind of situation where he had no other choice, he chose to believe in the divine light. Fengling was the spirit of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. In this world, no one knew how to use the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art better than him. Although Kong Shinmu only had 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Fengling was still able to use the remaining power to the fullest. It was because of this that Feng Ling was able to block the prison that was gradually closing in on Kong Shinmu. At the same time, he also dispelled the powerful binding force within the prison. When the divine light stopped the summoned creatures, it also stopped the creatures that wanted to take the opportunity to attack Kong Shinmu. Without any external interference, Kong Shinmu withdrew his devouring power. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that after sealing off his senses, withdrawing his devouring power was much faster than before. Moreover, the devouring power's intensity seemed to have increased. Looking at the tiny aura of death trapped by his soul consciousness, Kong Shinmu made a bold decision. He chose to devour it. The instant the devouring power surrounded the aura of death, Feng Ling shouted, "Stop!" However, Kong Shinmu had sealed off his senses and hearing just now. No matter how loud Feng Ling's voice was, Kong Shinmu wouldn't be able to hear him at all. He knew what Kong Shinmu would face in the future if he devoured the aura of death, so he wanted to stop Kong Shinmu. This was the aura of death of the Dead Spirit Clan, one of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans in the other realm. Devouring the aura of death was equivalent to possessing the symbol of the Dead Spirit Clan. Although the Dead Spirit Clan was the weakest among the 4 great corpse ancestor clans, their strength lay in the aura of death. The aura of death was the symbol of the Dead Spirit Clan, but it wasn't the only symbol of the Dead Spirit Clan. The aura of death, or in other words, the flame of death, was essentially a kind of flame power. It was born in the Dead Spirit race, but very few people knew how it was born and how it was produced. This was the main reason why the Dead Spirits Clan was still able to stand among the 4 great corpse ancestor clans. Kong Shinmu possessed the power of an unparalleled divine flame. It was a kind of unparalleled divine power that could control the power of all flames in the world. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the flame of necromancy was one of them. Of course, the flame of dead spirits was not an ordinary flame. In addition to the fact that it existed in the other world, if one wanted to use the power of the Supreme Divine Fire to control the flame of dead spirits, one would need to reach the 9th level of the Supreme Divine Fire. Reaching the 9th level of the Supreme God Force was equivalent to having half a foot in the door of the rules for Supreme God Force cultivators. The power of the 9th level of the Supreme Divine Fire was not only the power to control the power of fire in the world, but it could also erase the existence of a certain type of fire. This level of divine power was only enough to control the flames of undead spirits. This was enough to show how terrifying the flames of undead spirits were. With Kong Shinmu's current abilities, directly devouring the undead spirit aura, even if it was just a small portion, was highly likely to have the opposite effect. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.